Arc 8, Chapter 12, Natsuki Subaru and Vincent Abelix. The moment he threw that punch, it was the moment he had been the most frustrated about having become smaller. Even more so than the tragedy of the Gladiator Island, which he had been able to unite everyone in order to prevent, even more so than the sparker used to win Gustav over to his side, even more so than his dialogue with Cecilus under the moon, at this very moment, that he could have punched him just a little bit harder were he to have a larger body, made him frustrated. Vincent, you. Taking the blow from the young Subaru's fist on his left cheek, the Emperor, his face soiled with blood, widened his eyes. His gaze was directed at his own feet, observing Subaru after the latter had failed to land, tumbling down onto the floor. However, though his face held shock, it was bereft of indignation. More so than the humiliation he felt, his astonishment had been stronger. The Emperor, having been given more shock than pain from Subaru's fist, while pressing his hand against where it had struck. Vincent, do you not hold your life dear? If I were to raise mine hand, the flame of the Yang sword would scorch your very being. Subaru, yup, it's not dear to me. Compared to letting you go without giving you a wallop right here and now, something like burning to death isn't scary or anything at all. Vincent, wah. Receiving a scowl from the Emperor, Subaru jumped up before his eyes, and riposted, firmly. Just then, fatigue yet remaining in his body, he lost his balance and fell backwards, slamming against the door, but that was just right. Leaning against the door like that, Subaru spread his arms, thus obstructing the Emperor from proceeding. That he did not hold his life dear to him, such a thing was a downright lie. But, in this tit-for-tat, he did not want to show even a hint of weakness. This Emperor was spouting everything he had to say without holding back, so whether it be with fists or words, Subaru would not be satisfied unless he fired back. Subaru, it's just as you guys say. I think, I can't be understood. After all, even I myself don't really understand what my criteria is for taking action. Vincent, you guys, you say? Biting his lip, the Emperor frowned as Subaru glared at him. Lowering his hand from his cheek, his face defiled with blood trickling from Subaru's hand, the Emperor was at a loss from the fact that Subaru's statement had been aimed at multiple targets, possibly being directed at someone aside from himself, though, no matter how much he pondered it over, there was no way he could understand. The man before Subaru's eyes was the Emperor, the other man nothing more than a foot soldier without an officer rank. And yet, the wounds that both had given Subaru, the scars they had both pointed out, were one and the same. Subaru, I want to prioritize the people I like, the people I hold dear, and protect them. Those are my honest feelings. But, even if it's someone I hate or someone I don't know, and they're put into danger right in front of me, then Todd had said that Subaru would choose who to save based on his subjective likes and dislikes. Abel had said that Subaru would recklessly choose who to save regardless of likes or dislikes. Both of those were correct, and since both were correct, they were mistaken. After all. Subaru, but is that really such a bad thing? Vincent, what? Subaru, is that so bad? Without the resolve to try and carry the whole world on my back, and without any grand significance, is it really so bad if I save those who are right in front of me on impulse? As Subaru rose his voice, violently stomping his feet, and the Emperor widened his sable eyes, though still amidst a rapid sequence of expression and demeanors uncharacteristic of him, Subaru yet pressed him for an answer. Subaru, it's just as you said. I consider the things within my own range of vision, I reach as far out as I can, that's what I've been doing until today. What's so bad about that? Vincent, you dare now object? What is so bad, you say? Is it not obvious? For what reason do you focus not on the greater picture, and instead act upon your selfish emotions? The authority bestowed upon you, for what reason do you not put it to good use? Subaru, I use absolutely everything. I'm standing here because I put it to good use. Don't get emotional, huh? Stop talking like an idiot. The way I choose to use my own emotions is up to me. Vincent, then at least act in accordance with those emotions. If you are to decide between somebody's life or death based on your likes and dislikes, do not deviate from that method in any sort of way. Your way of being is riddled with distortions, Subaru. If that's your conclusion from me leading a righteous life, I'm all for having a warped personality. As the Emperor still continued to rebuke Subaru's attitude, the latter delivered a powerful kick as he replied. Kicking the Emperor's shin over and over again, his anger, too much to be contained, erupted in full. As Subaru unleashed kicks charged with his foul temper, the Emperor contorted his cheeks, and Vincent, we shall speak no further. With that, he attempted to terminate the conversation one-sidedly. Once more, he did it one-sidedly. Trying to leave behind the divide between their sense of values in that manner, the Emperor seized Subaru's shoulders. The Emperor tried to move him out of the way, and with the physical strength of a child, he could not go against an adult. That was why Subaru bit down on that hand with all of his might. Vincent, you. Subaru, stop being so selfish. Biting down without restraint, he engraved the Emperor's right hand with a bite wound, his right hand, bleeding as he forcibly shook it free, together with the one bearing a wound from the knife. Both of the Emperor's hands were shedding blood. Causing the great and noble apex of the Empire to shed blood, Subaru would be unable to avoid the death penalty. Subaru, that'll only happen if the country still exists, you stupid idiot. Vincent, what are you? Gah. The moment he had been shaken off, Subaru's small body grabbed the Emperor from the front, pressed his head against the latter's abdomen, and clipped his knees. A fighting style he had learned from Whites, who had devised it himself. Proceeding to apply Whites' teachings even further, he took a mounted position, and attained dominance through street rules. With the Emperor having fallen onto his back, sitting upon his chest as to weigh him down, Subaru grabbed him by the collar and slammed him into the floor. Were the back of one's head to be struck over and over again, no matter who it was, they would be knocked out instantly, however. Vincent, do not get carried away. The first time, shock; the second time, confusion; the third time, although he had been successful in bringing the back of his head to the ground, he was stopped by a simple difference in strength. Furthermore, he was thrown off of the Emperor's body, having been grabbed by his hair. Screaming out with a gya-ah. As he tumbled to the floor, Subaru saw the Emperor stand back up in his peripheral vision, and once again, the latter attempted to head for the door. Subaru, like I'd let you. Jumping onto the Emperor's knees from behind, by means of sheer force he halted the body moving towards the door. Due to Subaru's excessive momentum, however, the Emperor was knocked over forwards. The result? Vincent, bah. Then, with a dull thud, the Emperor crashed face first into the cabin's door. Vincent, . A firm sound echoed, the sound of him placing his hands against the door his face had been pressed against, and thus the Emperor rose to his feet once more, after having fallen face first onto it. Then, turning around, the Emperor seized Subaru by the collar with both his hands, hoisting him up. The two's bodies spinning around to switch places, Subaru's back was slammed against the door, pressed against it with force, as he leaped out of pain. Before his eyes, the nose and forehead of the Emperor were reddened. From point-blank range he glared at Subaru, the latter's legs suspended. Vincent, what do you want? What is your objective? What is it that you desire? Subaru, I want to hit you. My objective is to hit you. My desire is to hit you. Vincent, Subaru, what about you? What do you want? What is your objective? Just what the hell is it that you desire? Vincent, . Caught by his collar, clawing at the Emperor's hands, Subaru's spittle flew as he shouted in reply. Then twisting his head, he opened his mouth in an attempt to bite the Emperor's hand one more time, but no matter how hard he tried, he was unable to reach it. At the very least, drool amassed in the Emperor's hand as he spat. In that way, while having his hand sullied by Subaru's saliva, the Emperor's cheeks stiffened for a reason separate to that disgrace, he muttered. Vincent, My desire? Subaru, that's right. There's gotta be something you wanted to do apart from spouting grandiose and meaningless words at me. If not, you wouldn't go out of your way to come to me at such a busy time. Vincent, Subaru, aren't you the one that doesn't understand yourself the most? While you were talking just now, there was something you put the most energy into, something you put the most emotion into. That's what's most important for you. The topic of evacuating from the imperial capital, or the topic of suspecting Subaru being a stargazer. The topic of dealing with Emilia and the others, who had hailed from the kingdom, to the topic of the divide stemming from being unable to understand Subaru's way of being. Now that he thought of it, there had been no words expressing sympathy for Subaru after his recovery from having fallen unconscious. In the first place, this bastard had not said anything in regards to this being their first meeting after the Demon City either. But putting all those numerous affairs aside, the one topic he was most passionate about was obvious. Subaru, Chaisha. Vincent, why, Natsuki Subaru. The heat that had boiled over just before during their grappling match disappeared. However, in its place was a cold heat, a heat set alight by that question, now uttered once more. If that which accompanied violence was a scarlet flame, then that question had come accompanied by a flame of azure hue. That azure glow blazing in his eyes, it scorched Subaru as he stood before the Emperor, while the latter posed his question. Vincent, I was the one who trained him. If it were him, he would have been able to do the same work as me without even the slightest deviation. It could even be said that he was superior in regards to military power, depending on the circumstances. Subaru, Vincent, there was no difference between mine and that damned Chaisha's ability. Whichever of us remained would take over the fight to oppose the great disaster, seeing it through to completion. Why? Staring directly into Subaru's black eyes, the Emperor's, no, Abel's black eyes wavered. The mask of Emperor, which he had likely worn alongside a resolve to never again remove it, was ripped off of him not long after he had steeled himself like so. And thus, Subaru gazed upon Abel's face. And finally, not as the Emperor of this country, but as a single person who had been bereaved of someone dear, Abel could not help but question Subaru. Vincent, why did you let me live despite your loathing, and let Chaisha die, Natsuki Subaru? After gaining self-awareness of what he had wanted to ask Subaru himself, Abel hurled the same question towards Subaru as he had done before their scuffle had broken out. The sorrow, the fragility contained within that voice, were incomparable to what they had been just before. The Emperor known as Vincent Volachia utilized absolutely everything in his possession for the sake of the Empire. Ruling over the great country that possessed the vastest lands among those known in this world as the Four Great Countries, Vincent Volachia reigned as Emperor, an omnipresent and all-seeing existence. For that Emperor known as Vincent Volachia to issue that question not for the sake of the Empire, but rather as a mere single person, was evidence that this singular question carried a weight rivaling that of the Empire itself. Perceiving that in his skin, his blood, his brain, his very soul, Subaru's heart trembled. At the same time, in contrast to Abel's swell of emotion, Subaru's emotions were tranquil. Subaru, Just why was it that the person known as Chaisha had to die? Unbeknownst to Subaru, Abel and Chaisha had each been placed on different plates of a scale, and one of those two sides had fallen into a situation beyond saving. Thus, Abel had intended to share in the fate of the scale as his own side tipped into perdition. That envisioning had been painted over. Most likely, by the deceased Chaisha himself. Abel had likely prepared for his own death since long ago. If one was born, someday, their life would assuredly reach its end. All were aware of such a fact. But it was just as if Abel's situation was completely different to the reality everybody unconsciously ignored. Resolve towards destined death, that was no different from Subaru confronting the trigger of his return by death. Always, Abel had been squaring off against his own forthcoming death. With the same resolve as Subaru, who fought to the bitter end while believing that the arrival of death was something that could be changed, that it was something that must be changed no matter what. Abel had continued to fight. If Subaru were to go without dying, Emilia, Rem, and Beatrice would end up dying. Otto and everyone else, Tanza and everyone else, all of the Shadrach, Flop, and Medium, a great number of people would end up dying. In exchange for his own life, he attempted to allow everyone to survive. If he had come to expend the entirety of his resolve for that purpose, then it must have been the same for Abel. Vincent, I completed all preparations with that end in sight. But even so, Emilia, Rem, and Beatrice, they had all taken Subaru's place, permitting his survival. In order to let Subaru live, Otto and everyone else, Tanza and everyone else, all of the Shadrach, Flop, and Medium, a great number of other people, had become sacrifices so he could survive. Even if nobody else was capable of understanding that despair, Natsuki Subaru was the single person who had to keep it in mind. Nullifying that possibility, painting over that reality by means of his authority, Natsuki Subaru was the single person who would not deny the despair that Abel was going through without paying any heed. Understanding, gulping down, there was something he must say in addition. Subaru, I'm not a stargazer, Abel. Vincent, the words he spoke, they probably seemed like a betrayal to Abel, this late in the game. This late in the game, Subaru had not returned the reply Abel's desire, instead keeping it to himself. But, however much Abel suspected Subaru, reality would not budge. Perhaps Subaru was able to do the same things a stargazer could. Perhaps Subaru possessed means with which to intervene with fate to an extent greater than a stargazer's own means. Even so, he was not omnipotent. He could never be omnipotent. It would be nice if he were omnipotent, he could never be sufficient as to aspire to be omnipotent. Subaru, that's why I couldn't save this Chaisha person you talked about. I wouldn't know how to save him, either. But, I'll just say this one thing. Vincent, what is it? Subaru, supposing I really did have a power like the one you speak of, even then, I'd choose to save you, who I hate, rather than someone I don't know. Without reasons like seeing ahead to what lies in the future, that's what I would do, that's what I will do. Truly, even he himself thought his nature was a helpless one. But, that was the result that Natsuki Subaru, by consulting with the abilities he possessed, within what he understood to be the realms of what were his own capabilities, had reached. Vincent, Slowly, strength left Abel's hold on his collar, and Subaru's body was released. While his back rubbed against the door, Subaru's body slid down. Even now, Abel's hands were holding on to Subaru's collar, but those fingers, white from the strength that had been put into them, now lost their pale coloration alongside said strength. If he truly wished to remove those hands, he could have done it easily, however, Subaru did not do so. With them still seizing his collar, Subaru merely called his name out with Abel. Vincent, if you claim to not be a stargazer. Such was the frail sound produced by Abel's lips. But, Abel himself had not been satisfied with the sound he had uttered, and continued no further. Abel's black eyes began to wander, in search of the words he truly desired. He would put his emotions into words. Perhaps the Emperor of the Empire, who had not once done such a thing till this day, who had not once done something that even a toddler was capable of, would now do so. Vincent, you would try and save me no matter what. Vincent, in a situation where the survival of the Empire is at stake, you occupy me with trifles of such insignificance. Each time, his words would get stuck halfway through. No matter the words, no matter the emotions, they were not enough to express what Abel felt in his heart of hearts. Repeatedly, Abel ceased speaking, revised his words, and corrected himself, yet Subaru did not rush him. Vincent, you detest me, view me as an enemy. His intelligent self realizing that the response of his desires laid not beyond his faltering words, Abel started the words he ought to say anew, over and over again. He, known as the wisest emperor since the inception of the Wallachian Empire, a man whose wisdom was respected by everyone, did so, and thus, After repetitions upon repetitions, he finally managed to do it. Vincent, I, Subaru, Vincent, I, had resolved myself for my own death. I had not resolved myself to lose someone dear. Having only forged his resolve to be the one leaving the rest behind, his resolve for being left behind had not been cultivated. Perhaps he had even gone as far as to think about what words he would leave behind in his final moments. There was even the possibility one would find notes here and there left for after his death, if they were to search. All had been done for the sake of entrusting the matter to those who would continue forth, done with a resolve that had not even considered the possibility he would be on the side being entrusted. Vincent, why? A quavering voice questioned so. While speaking in a quavering voice, Abel detached his hands from Subaru's collar. Those hands, his own very blood-stained hands, he brought them to his face, and concealed his expression. The Emperor, who would by no means even close both his eyes in front of others, covered his face with both his hands. Vincent, why, did you leave me behind and die, Chaisha? His face in his hands, his voice trembling, his black eyes potentially even tearing up, Vincent Volakia fell to his knees. Having lost a very, very important person, the man who had likely not had even the time to grieve, not needing to wear the mask of emperor in front of a rude and disrespectful individual whom he hated, fell to his knees. Witnessing just that, Subaru, taking a very long and immensely deep breath. Subaru, I'm sorry. With that, as a fellow struggler fighting against an unreasonable fate, he faced the fellow struggler who had been wounded while earnestly continuing to fight, and imparted words that would never be able to serve as comfort. When swinging at Abel as he tried to leave, what came to Subaru's mind was the memory of the time Otto had once punched him in a similar manner. Subaru, you're incredible, man. I could never be as smart as you. I'll never say that to his face, though. Since he would feel embarrassed and annoyed, he really did not wish to state so directly to that very person. The most he was willing to consider was that one day, once Otto was dying of old age, he would sit at the side of the bed and say, to be honest, I thought you were incredible. If he were to really go through with it, he had faith that Otto, even in his dying moments, would retort with, then why have you been keeping silent about it until now? Anyhow. Subaru, With a thud, Abel leaned his back against the wall of the cabin as he sat on the ground, observing the dim interior of the cabin as he hugged one of his knees. Subaru, too, absent-mindedly savored the silence while sitting next to him with legs crossed. From the outset, Subaru's true feelings were undoubtedly feelings of gratitude towards Otto, alongside a wish to mess with him a bit. Some time ago, at a time Subaru had been on the verge of buckling under the weight of attempting to carry anything and everything by his lonesome, Otto had given a wallop to Subaru's cheek, had lambasted him with words he needed to hear. That he was keeping up useless airs in front of his friends, so he was told. That experience had given Subaru the courage to spring off of the bed. But then again, Subaru, not like you and I are friends or anything. Vincent, Of course. Speak not of such repulsive things. Being a friend of yours. No, I simply have no need for the likes of friends. Nor shall I ever want them. Subaru, so your reasoning isn't that you can't make friends, but that you won't make them? I also did that when I pretended to be a proud lone wolf, but it's completely obvious to the people around you. Vincent, your disrespect knows no bounds, now does it? Seated close to each other yet without looking towards the other, Subaru and Abel exchanged words. No longer were the heated emotions from their grappling scuffle present, but on the other hand, they were not vanished to the point that they would abort their conversation midway, nor were they able to feign civility. Subaru's face, clothes, and hands were stained with blood all over. Of course, Abel's face, hair, and clothes were also stained with blood all over. Inside the cabin, the sheets were stained with blood, and the knife had fallen to the ground. Blots of scattered blood were present here and there, and evidence of damage and of blood having been shed was everywhere. The amount of blood was not enough for this place to be dubbed a murder scene, but it sure was enough for it to look like a crime scene. Subaru, But, even if we thrash around, we could never destroy the whole cabin. That's what our individual limit is, you and I. Even with Subaru and Abel having gone into a no-holds-barred rampage, the most they had been able to do was break the furnishings. Were the ones to go on a rampage the truly dangerous people present in this world, the cabin would probably be destroyed in the blink of an eye, no traces of it being left behind. How much time would it take for Emilia, with that adorable face and those adorable hands of hers, to adorably dismantle this cabin? Subaru, even if you and I throw down, it's nothing so adorable, even. Vincent, just what in the world is your problem? Subaru, what about you? What the hell's your problem? I'll tell you what, your story's all over the goddamn place, I can't even tell what you wanna talk about. Vincent, .. Abel remained silent, and pondered. The reason he had held his tongue was likely because he was made aware of how scattered the topics were. It was the result of plugging his ears to the appeals of his true intentions, and only choosing the topics that felt good to his ears, and flowed nicely. Since he had been on edge, there had not been a single topic that was sincere. That was the essence of Abel's speech till just before, and he had also now become aware of that lapse of his. Thence, how he would recover from that, Subaru waited to see. Vincent, Natsuki Subaru, is it the truth that you are not a stargazer? Subaru, it's true, I'm not a stargazer or anything like that. Stuff like premonitions of the future, that fits the witch cult more than it fits me. I don't really get along with those guys. Vincent, I did happen to hear that you had felled 2 Sin archbishops, in Lagunica. Subaru, it's not public, but it's actually been 3. Gluttony's been as well. Nah, it's kinda difficult to say whether Gluttony's been defeated or not, so forget about that. Louis' situation is also. Vincent, what is it? Subaru, you didn't do anything to Louis, right? After all, I still haven't forgiven you for that time you said Louis was to be killed. In the demon city of Chaos Flame, Abel's firm stance towards Louis had been what had triggered Subaru's separation from Abel and the rest, going on to act independently. When her identity as a Sin archbishop came to light, Abel had declared that she would not be tolerated. With that as the reason, Subaru had moved separately from Abel and the rest of their group, the pair of him and Louis isolated and without assistance then headed towards Yorna's castle. Subaru, though stuff's happened until now, I still won't forgive you, Vincent, speak not of foolish things. Though, was it not you who thoroughly hated that girl? Subaru, before is before, now is now. To begin with, if you've kept your impression of me from our first meeting, you doubt my sanity considering the members I get along with. Vincent, your sanity is something I have doubted since the Shadrakian village. Your concern is unnecessary. Subaru, huh? Vincent, no harm has been inflicted upon that girl. After all, what I had been trying to say back then was not that we ought to execute someone whose apparent identity was that of a Sin archbishop on the spot. Subaru, what? Vincent, you jumped to a hasty conclusion. Diligently reflect upon this. Having been told that his worries were needless, Subaru was at a loss for words. But, even supposing that were true, Abel's cold-hearted and indifferent attitude had been part of the reason for Subaru making a conclusion so hastily. Adding up Abel's attitude up until then had led to his distrust back then. Subaru, that was an issue of your attitude. Vincent, it was necessary. It was just in case, so you would not wish for my survival. Subaru, Vincent, all grounded on the conjecture that you were a stargazer, that included. You, who continues to produce results unprecedented within the kingdom, have performed deeds no ordinary person would be able to. Subaru, that's. Vincent, although, there was no need for me to go out of my way to worsen your impression of me. Even if I did not act as such, you are the type of person who would detest me the most. Abhorrence and disdain, they both overflow from your heart. Subaru, you. Damn. Bastard. Whether it was a lie, the truth, good or bad, Abel's words caused veins to bulge in Subaru's forehead. But, as Subaru explored his relationship with Abel while treading on thin ice, Abel had come into contact with Subaru with a mental state akin to treading a tightrope. With Subaru on ice, and Abel walking a tightrope, no interaction of the sort could ever proceed smoothly. After all, each of them went without looking at anything but their own feet. They did not even regard the other's face. Subaru, I don't know anything about that Chaisha guy. He kicked you out from the throne, and turned himself into you pretending to be emperor. I only happened upon him in Chaos Flame, when he was posing as emperor. Vincent, Subaru, I don't get what that person was thinking, or what he had been scheming in driving you away from the palace. But, you got frustrated in such a way because that person died, and if he really did die when you were supposed to, I do get that. Therefore. Falteringly, Subaru spoke of what he thought as he thought it. Since they had an unspoken agreement to not face each other, Subaru could not see Abel's expression as he spoke those words. A tad frightening, that was. That person was someone who Abel lamented losing to an extent such that he could not preserve the equilibrium of his heart. For Subaru, speaking about that person while knowing nothing about them, his remarks could perhaps trample upon Abel's heart far too much, but, he thought, though it had not been for a very long time, having been embroiled in a situation that concerned the survival of the nation, having been completely manipulated by this man who gave his name as Abel, Subaru thought. Subaru, that Chaisha person, he sure was incredible. Though perhaps inappropriate, as he lifted his face, he produced a spirited voice. It had been no forceful attempt to brighten things, it had been praise overflowing from Subaru's heart. In reality, just how many of them were there? People who could betray the predictions of the man renowned as the wisest emperor since the inception of this Wallachian empire, who molded just about every last thing merely within his own mind, who valued things proceeding as per his expectations. Just how many people could go against that, and fulfill their own goals in such spectacular fashion? Just that was more than enough to earn Subaru's praise. Moreover, he had performed to the extent that Abel, having been left behind, was left hesitant and disheartened. He did not know if that was in accordance to the expectations held. Subaru, you said there wouldn't be a big difference whether you or that person was left behind. If that's true, then there's only one reason why that person made this situation. Vincent, you. Subaru spoke as he thought, and without facing him, Abel let out a muted voice. He was not so sure if anger had been present in that timbre or not, especially because he went without verbally assaulting Subaru in the way the latter had grown familiar with. Vincent, are you saying that you understand the reason why Chaisha plotted against me? Indeed, it was rather something to urge Subaru to voice the conclusion he had reached. Vincent, Abel desired an answer. An answer that even Abel's own clever brain could not come up with. For something like that to come out of the mouth of Subaru, who did not even know the person known as Chaisha, even if Abel had no expectations, he had begun to have expectations. He could not help but think of those expectations as added pressure, but Subaru, well, no matter what you'll think of me, we're already this far in. Once he had stood up in defiance, there remained no reason to hesitate in speaking exactly what he thought. The reason as to why Chaisha had left not himself, but Abel, behind, that Subaru had thought of. That was? Subaru, with fate trying to kill you, you resigned yourself to the opponent that was fate. That's gotta have irritated him. Vincent, huh? Subaru, there's also a pattern of wanting someone to live even at the expense of your own life. But, I don't think that's the case here. After all, the way you live wouldn't have anyone do anything of the sort for you. He could understand the feeling that one might want another person to live even if it meant they themselves would die. But, in order to harbor a feeling of the sort, they must greatly think of the other person as dear, and they need a reason to be made to think that way. Prepared for his own destined death, desperate to pave the path for the sake of those who would continue after him, it was implausible that Abel would have anyone think of him in such a way. Therefore, Subaru's answer was that. Subaru, Chaisha got irritated because of you. After all, he even proved it. Vincent, proved it, you say? Proved what? Proved that I was plotted against, and that I was a fool? Subaru, Flop-san and Myzelda-san have probably also realized that you're a moron with a good head on him. What I mean is the reach of the thing known as fate. Vincent, fate. As though vocalizing that word for the first time, Abel's tongue became acquainted with that unfamiliar concept, muttering so. In reality, for Abel, who confronted everything head-on, who resisted endlessly armed with his own predictions, all impediments could be put into words. Likely, he had not realized his opponent was something so absurd, so formless as fate. But, beyond all doubts, the enemy to which Abel had unconsciously accepted defeat was fate. At the same time, Chaisha had proved that very thing by using his own life, and letting Abel live. Subaru, fate can be fought. There's no reason to give up, not even a single one. Vincent, faintly catching his breath, Abel kept silent as if the words he had been told had struck his very heart. Had he not believed his enemy to be fate, likely, he would not have thought to fight it, or to even resist it. It would not have been something he had even considered. However, supposing he were to know just what exactly that enemy was, what could possibly ensue? If he, the wisest emperor since the inception of the Wallachian Empire, were to know the true identity of his enemy, just what would he do? Subaru, Abel, I'm not a stargazer. Vincent, Subaru, but. Adjacent to Abel, who remained silent, Subaru spoke as he placed his hands on the knees of his crossed legs. Upon being accused, he denied it, only to be accused again. Upon denying it, he was accused, only to deny it again. Although explaining or affirming the matter of his own authority, the matter of return by death, was something he was not able to do, Subaru had also resolved his heart on something, during this dialogue. That something was that which would have been his likely answer to Todd Fang, who had cornered him with words completely, leaving him unable to riposte in clear terms before their parting. Subaru, I'll save as many people as I possibly can, as long as they're within range of my hand. Even so, if there truly are still lives I'm not able to save, that's. Vincent, a defeat served to you by fate, would it not be so? Subaru, I can't get a complete victory. After all, it's not just me who's fighting fate. He had not been able to save everything. Thus, Subaru was unable to declare that he was going to save everything, even from here onwards. While roaring for that inevitable fate to bring it on, while vowing to continue fighting against fate, yet still being faced with the loss of lives, Natsuki Subaru would mourn and lament, only to then continue to declare such things, and in that manner, for the sake of diminishing the chances for him to lament, for the sake of diminishing the chances for him to shed tears. Subaru, lend me your strength, Abel. If you do that, I'll also lend you mine. Vincent, Subaru, from this point onwards, I'll cooperate in full. That said, I won't say selfish things without consulting with Emilia and the others, but that's just how passionate I am. That's why. Saying that, Subaru firmly clapped his knees, and stood up. Then, without looking at Abel's face, he slowly advanced to the middle of the cabin, to the side of the bed. With a sidelong glance to the disheveled and blood-stained sheets, Subaru reached his hand into the basket of fruits. Inside was the upper which Abel had abandoned after splitting it in half. The cross-section of its white insides were turning to a light brown coloration due to being exposed to the air, but not concerning himself with that, Subaru picked the halves up, then. Subaru, help me finish eating the upper you cut in half. Tossing a half of the upper over to Abel, he sunk his teeth into the half he held onto. With a pleasant sound, the sweet juice of the fruit slowly filled his mouth, and Subaru looked into the face of Abel, still plopped down on the floor. Having caught the upper thrown at him, Abel brought his eyes down towards it, and after a moment of hesitation, he bit into it. With a similarly pleasant sound, the sweet and sour flavor ought to have filled his mouth as well. Whether he liked it or disliked it, hated it or loved it, was completely unrelated to that flavor. As fellow living beings, there would be no difference in the flavor of the upper that they shared. Vincent, Natsuki Subaru. Subaru, what's up? Vincent, I am not fond of you. Subaru, NGH. Vincent, but, I require your strength. Declaring so, Abel slowly stood up. With the half-eaten upper in his hand, Abel trained his sable eyes upon Subaru. Once again he hid all the hues of uncharacteristic emotions that he had displayed within the cabin behind his consciousness as the Emperor, however, while those yet revealed themselves ever so slightly via his eyes and voice. Vincent, apologies for mine many acts of rudeness. O Knight of the Kingdom. With that, upon seeing the Emperor of the sacred Wallachian Empire bow his head, Subaru smiled. Smiling, while biting into what remained of the upper. Subaru, I won't apologize for my many acts of disrespect, Emperor of the Empire. And with that, the first step to rectify the discrepancies in their relationship, which had been mistaken ever since its very start, was taken. Arc 8, Chapter 13, To Each Their Wounds. ? You also came, Rem. Rem looked up quietly, as a voice called out to her from her side. At the coupling of the coupled dragon carriage, a silver-haired girl opened the door of the next car and called out to Rem, who was leaning her back against the wall of the car. It was Emilia. She had a beautiful face with a soft look in her eyes, and a girl holding her hand by her side. It was Beatrice, who had rushed to Subaru during the chaos at the imperial capital. It was a touching sight, but Rem's feelings toward them were extremely complicated. Of course, this was partly because these women were related to Rem's lost memories that she herself had no knowledge of, but that was not the only reason. Unlike Ram, who she had instinctively known was her sister, and the other people who had called themselves her companions, these two people were special. They were special in that they were deeply connected to Subaru. Both of them felt a particularly strong connection to him during the situation surrounding the imperial capital, during the retreat, and afterwards when they were visiting Subaru while he was unconscious. Rem did not know why it bothered her so much. Rem, Emilia-san, and Beatrice-chan. Beatrice, Rem is also concerned about where the discussion is going, I suppose. Rem, concerned. Yes, right, concerned I might be. When asked by Beatrice, who had addressed her by name, Rem looked down slightly. The reason Rem stood in the empty passageway was to watch over the cabin a short distance away, the cabin assigned to Natsuki Subaru as his sleeping quarters. Subaru and Abel were now confronting each other in a quiet cabin after the large crowd of visitors had left. Abel had a grim face, and when he was seen, he was often wearing an Oni mask, so it was refreshing for Rem to see his true face. However, as far as Rem knew, Abel always had a scowl on his face when he was unmasked. But today, his already grim face looked even more stiffened than before. Emilia, Rem, you've been around Subaru and Abel. Emperor Vincent for a while, haven't you? Are they good friends? Rem, Emperor Vincent, I'm not used to calling him that. And I don't get the impression that the two are very friendly with each other. I would say that even though they had agreed on some ideas, they didn't get along. Emilia, that's what I thought. Beatrice, well, that was predictable. In fact, Abel's way of thinking is like oil and water with Subaru, I suppose. Betty prefers the sentimental way Subaru thinks, in fact. Emilia, geez, Beatrice is so quick to spoil Subaru. You have to properly listen to Abel's side of the story. Emperor Vincent's side of the story. Emilia's shoulders slumped at Rem's answer, but her lips pouted at Beatrice's subsequent assertion. In front of Rem, who thought her expression seemed to change from one moment to the next, Emilia added a surprised and looked at her. Emilia, and, Rem, since we're in Wallachia, you have to call me Emily. Rem, is there a point to that? Emilia, of course there is. No one thinks I'm Emilia. Right, Beatrice? Beatrice, since Betty also spoils Emilia, To give no answer is a kindness, I suppose. Emilia, huh? What does that mean? Emilia's eyes widened at Beatrice's kind misdirection as she held her hand. Rem felt that her feelings were at the mercy of the two as she saw their hard-to-dislike interactions, but she soon grew fond of Emilia and Beatrice. In the first place, if what she had heard was true, they had risked a lot to come to this country to look for both Rem and Subaru. There was no way she could dislike them. Rem, unlike with him, there's nothing suspicious about them. Subaru carried a stench that inspired fierce, instinctive alarm. While a large part of Rem's hostility was due to that, there was no sign of it in Emilia and the others. So, like with Louis, the people of Shadrach, Flop, and the others, there was no reason to bother snapping at them. Although Rem, that person's smell suddenly becoming fainter is also scary. She was concerned about Subaru, who had lost his strong stench while they had been separated. Since she did not know what exactly it was, and between it existing and not existing it was definitely better if it did not, she wanted to say that things had improved. And, as she had been thinking that. Who? It's Rem Chan, Emily Chan, and Beatrice Chan. The door of the carriage on the opposite side from where Rem and the others were standing was opened, and the other party who had appeared called out the names of the three in a loud voice. Waving her hands vigorously, a tall woman strolled towards them. Her long golden hair was freely arranged, her skin was exposed like a dancer's, and above all, she had fully grown arms and legs appropriate for her age. She was Medium San. Medium, Yahoo. Perhaps, are you all worried about Abel Chin and Subaru Chin too? Emilia, yes, that's right. Medium Chan was as well. Medium, yeah, yes. See, I finally have a big body again, don't I? Now, unlike when I was little, I can stop adults from fighting, so I thought I could be useful. With her chest puffed out, Medium answered as such. They had not seen her for long, but like Subaru, she was one of those whose appearance had changed from that of an adult to a child. The childish Medium was also very endearing, retaining her lively personality, but her charm remained the same regardless of the length of her arms and legs, so the familiar figure calmed Rem down. It seemed that Medium had also been very frustrated when she was little, and she seemed to be enjoying being back to her large body as much as she could. In any case, Rem, to stop a fight. That is, between that person and Abel San. Medium, that's right, Tilda. It's been a while since the two of them talked properly. Aren't they going to go wild? Rem, I don't know. Setting aside that person, I can't imagine Abel San going berserk. With a stern face and a harsh voice, she had the impression that Abel was one who said painful things. However, unlike Rem, who had frowned at Medium's concerns, Emilia and Beatrice's opinions seemed to be closer to Medium's side. Beatrice, Betty agrees with Medium, in fact. At the very least, Subaru has a lot to say to that emperor, so he will probably snap at him, I suppose. Emilia, that's true. Emily, am a teensy bit worried too. A fight, it's not only about hitting each other, but also about hurting each other with words. Rem, is that how it is? Certainly, it would not be a scuffle, since there was no indication that Abel would raise his hand, but it was quite possible that Subaru could become emotional and the argument could intensify. Because Abel was rational, Rem felt that he talked circles around Subaru comparatively more often, but Abel may not have much leeway now. She had not exchanged many words with Abel, who had regained his position as emperor, but she could understand the concern of Medium and Beatrice. And that speculation was immediately verified to be correct. Subaru, okay? Anyways, let's sneak over to Garfield. If it's him, he should be able to understand our unavoidable circumstances. Vincent, what, the scandal of how a knight of the kingdom raised his hand against the emperor of the empire? Subaru, don't forget, if that goes to trial, I'll talk about everything you've been up to as a last resort. And so on. The door of the cabin opened as they continued the hushed exchange. The eyes of those in Rem's group, who were waiting for the discussion to be concluded, met the black eyes of the two men as they peeked out to see whether there was anyone in the aisle. Subaru opened his mouth with an R, while Abel frowned with a uck. However, that was not the extent of the reactions of Rem's group when they saw the state of the two of them. After all, both Subaru and Abel, who showed their faces, were covered in blood. Rem, unbelievable. Medium, you two were having a much bigger fight than I thought you would? Emilia, oh no. Beatrice. Quickly, heal him. Beatrice, it's as you see, in fact. Betty should have been there, I suppose. Subaru and Abel met their gazes at the group of women who had welcomed them with a flurried commotion. Then Abel sighed, and Subaru raised his hands in resignation. After that, Subaru, you're definitely going to get mad, so before that happens I gotta tell you. We've made up. With a wry smile on his pitiable face, he said that as if he had at least some good news to tell. In the end, their injuries were just a small cut on their hands, nothing impressive. Medium, but the cabin's a mess now and we don't have another cabin that we can prepare. Subaru, no, I'm not going to tell you something as self-important as to prepare another cabin. I've seriously reflected on what I are. Medium-san. You're back to normal. Medium, tilde, that's right, Subaru chin. No, that's no good. I'm happy that you said that, but I'm also angry at you. The two of you are hopeless tilde. Saying that, Medium put her hands on her waist and scolded Subaru for his poor attempt to change the topic of the conversation. Subaru's shoulders slumped in remorse, however, instead of the depressed Subaru, it was Abel, whom Subaru had fought with, that received the brunt of Medium's scolding. Medium, Abel chin as well, while Subaru chin is small, you can't act immature, okay? Vincent, do you understand what you just did? You raised a hand against the Emperor. Medium, because you're so great and all that, and no one has ever scolded you. Abel chin, you've grown up to be like this, haven't you? Vincent, .. Abel frowned and crossed his arms, meanwhile Medium was giving him a reproachful glare. As one could understand from the exchange that had just happened, surprisingly, Medium had slapped Abel over the head. Looking at the disastrous state of the cabin, it was reasonable to want to scold Abel for fighting with the young-looking Subaru, but Rem was impressed by the absurd act. Rem, if it's okay with Medium-san, may I also hit him? Vincent, do not join her. We do not have the leisure to look over each instance of disrespect one by one at this time. Do not do something that would make me have to take my time after the war to decide whether I should punish you by comparing it to your achievements. Rem, that's a shame. Of course, she had not expected to receive permission, but for Rem, it was fruitful to hear the words after the war come from Abel's mouth. At least, Abel was looking towards the future. Although she did not know what had been said during their conversation inside, compared to before he had visited this cabin, it felt like the light and color within his eyes had improved. Emilia, okay, this is good. But you need to change your clothes or else everyone will worry about you. You can go see everyone after you're dressed properly, okay? Beatrice, truly, you're so troublesome. In fact, you can't allow Betty to have any peace of mind, I suppose. Subaru, sorry. But it's been a while, it feels so fresh. For a while the only people who worried about me were, except for Tanza, all men. Having wiped off the blood on Subaru's face and hands with the hand towel she carried, Emilia patted him on the head. Beatrice, with her hands held out and seemingly trying to heal his wounds, shrugged her shoulders, appearing to feel not only a sense of relief, but also a sense of joy. Both of them seemed to feel happy to be looking after Subaru. Looking at this, for some reason Rem felt her chest tingle. Medium, hey, Abel chin, do you think you can manage? Not having noticed that which occurred in Rem's heart, Medium tilted her head as she asked Abel this question. Abel narrowed his black eyes at her question, and then nodded his head after a moment. Vincent, there is no problem. In fact, it is foolish to point at me and question whether I can work hard. Ever since I decided that I would assume the seat of emperor, I lost the right to act haphazardly. Medium, dash? Does that mean that you're going to continue working hard as the emperor? Vincent, dash. That is a foolish way of saying it, but roughly, yes. Medium, I see. Then I also agree. Let's work together, Tilda. Medium's face suddenly brightened up and she held her hand out towards Abel. Abel glared at Medium's hand, and proceeded to turn his face away. At Abel's cold attitude, Medium withdrew her hand and clapped her hands together, producing a snapping sound. Medium, well, should we go to meet the others? Big Bro also wanted to talk with Abel Chin. Vincent, I do not have the time to talk with that thing, but Serena Dracroy's flying dragon ship should also be back soon. Either way, I need to talk with the main players now. Rem, please wait. Towards Medium's urging, Abel drew back his chin. For Abel, who liked to take care of things quickly, she knew that from now on, important discussions would have to be held to discuss how to deal with the problems occurring in the imperial capital. Naturally, as people who were important to that discussion, it was already decided that Subaru and Emilia would be present, but before that, Rem had something important to say. Half of the reason Rem stood there was because of her concern about the twisted relationship between Subaru and Abel, but the other half was because of that. Subaru, Abel, I also have something that I want to do before I meet everyone. Something that I absolutely must do. So, let me go do that first. Rem, Stopping the exchange, Rem tried to tell them her reason for coming. However, Subaru interrupted Rem as he began to speak, turning his gaze towards her. That gaze made her understand that what he absolutely had to do was the same thing as what Rem had tried to say. So, Rem pursed her lips, and nodded. And then, Subaru, Rem, take me to Katya-san. ? What the fuck, brat? This ain't no place for you. When he visited his intended cabin, Subaru's eyes widened as he was greeted by a vulgar voice. Standing behind the open door was a man with a rough greeting voice that matched his eye-patched face. For a moment, he had a difficult time opening his memory drawer, but then it hit him. Subaru, Jamal. Right? Jamal, oh? How do you know my name? I don't know you. Subaru, you're alive. Jamal, aren't you a damned rude little brat, huh? The name of the man who had opened his mouth that had an unexpectedly clean set of teeth and made his throat growl, was Jamal. When Subaru was blown away to the Volakian Empire, he was one of the first Imperials he had encountered, and this was the man who had been Todd Fang's companion. As far as Subaru knew, it was certainly in the fortress city of Garrel, when Todd helped a General First Class, who had been previously captured, escape, where he should have been captured as a prisoner of war by the rear guards who remained. Following that, due to Subaru going through a lot, his safety had honestly slipped his mind. Subaru, why are you in this cabin? Jamal, what's so weird about me being in my little sister's cabin? Subaru, little sister. Hearing the sound of his suspicion melting away due to the answer, Subaru remembered. That reminded him, Todd mentioned that his fiancée was Jamal's younger sister. Meaning that, the people in front of him, Jamal and Katya, were actually siblings. The delicate Katya and the thuggish and wild Jamal were siblings. Subaru, well, both your hair color and frizziness are similar. Jamal, I don't understand what you're saying, but I do understand that you're pissing me off. Brat, if you don't want to get hurt you should. Nissan. Stop it. Perhaps annoyed by Subaru's attitude, Jamal rolled up his sleeves and showed him a gesture of trying to kick him out by force. But before he could do so, a shrill voice from behind called him to stop. Looking into the cabin past Jamal's side, the layout of the cabin was similar to the one in which Subaru was sleeping, and a woman was lying on a bed at the far end of the cabin. That woman was Subaru, Katya-san. Katya, you're finally awake. You've been sleeping too much. Seriously, really? Katya looked at Subaru across from the body of her brother, who was standing in the way, and he saw her sit up on her bed. Then Jamal quickly walked over to her and said, "Oi oi. Jamal, take it easy. You don't know when you're going to die, so move slowly." "Katya, I'm not that fragile. Don't compare me to a brother who doesn't even die when he's supposed to be dead." "Jamal, I didn't die in the first place, but you people would have selfishly killed me anyway." Jamal, his concern flat out rejected, and now stigmatized as a dead man after so long, slightly shuddered. It seemed like a lot had happened in the reunion of these siblings, but it was not Subaru's real intention to delve into that. There had been another reason for his visit. "Rem, are you all right?" Subaru looked down slightly and saw that his feet did not move very far from the entrance into the cabin, and it was Rem, who was with him, who had asked that. After apologizing to Emilia, Abel, and the others, Subaru visited this cabin with Rem. As Katya's friend, Rem had every reason to be present here. That was because she too had wanted to hear what Subaru was trying to do from here on out. "Subaru, yeah, I'm all right." Nodding, Subaru stepped into the cabin. On the bed, Katya and Jamal were still arguing about something, but when Subaru arrived with Rem, Katya was the one who had closed her mouth. As she kept her blue eyes, framed by long lashes, downcast. "Katya, is your body doing better now?" Even if it was just a prelude to the main topic, her concern for Subaru's body was kind. Her tone was blunt and brusque, but there was no doubt that she was a lovely woman at heart, and that was why she had become close to the unreliable Rem. To this woman, Subaru had to tell her. "Subaru, yeah, I'm all right. Thanks for worrying about me." "Katya, I wasn't worried or anything. It's just that this girl seemed anxious." Subaru, with a glance, Subaru looked toward Rem as she stood next to him, her expression stiff. Knowing roughly what was going to be discussed, he did not overreact to Katya's words as he normally would. Although it was something he anticipated, Subaru admonished his own weakness, which made him want to put off the main topic. Taking a deep breath, he exhaled. And then, "Subaru, I'm sorry. I couldn't bring Todd back." Yes, he informed her of the final parting between him and Todd in the Imperial capital. Katya, Squeezing his small fist tightly, overcome with grief, Subaru let the cruel truth be known. At the end of the battle in the Imperial capital, even though Todd had helped them break through the siege of zombies, their clash was all but inevitable. Subaru decided not to kill Todd, a man who hated and abhorred Subaru's way of thinking and who was determined to get rid of him, and they faced off against each other. But in the end, Subaru, he was washed away by the floodwater that swept into the city, but any more than that. Katya, Subaru, it's just that, in the fight against the zombies, he acted as a decoy and suffered a lot of injuries. That's why. At Subaru's report, Katya's hoarse exhale escaped. As if to overlap with that breath, Subaru described what he saw to Katya in a way that was not exactly as he had seen it. If he wanted to, Subaru could have given Katya hope. The reality was that the last time Subaru saw Todd, he was swallowed up by that muddy current and disappeared. If his body had not been found, it should have been possible to show some hope for his survival. But Subaru did not do that. Subaru, The last time Subaru saw Todd was when his figure was encompassed by the flood. However, the exact description had been left out. To be precise, the last time Subaru had seen Todd, he was in the form of a werewolf, taking a deep axe blow to his chest and tumbling into the rushing waters. He was severely wounded, unconscious, and swallowed up by the muddy current. He could not have escaped harm. Jamal, HK. Upon hearing Subaru's story, the sound of Jamal gritting his teeth hard could be heard echoing throughout the cabin. For Jamal, Todd was his companion, and, more than that, his future brother-in-law whom he had decided to entrust his sister Katya to. It was a terribly odd feeling, but if possible, Subaru also wanted to hope that Todd had survived. Having his expectations seriously betrayed, their relation was that of his life being targeted, and in the world where Subaru actually returned by death, Todd was an opponent that had taken his life multiple times. However, since he had a history of dealing with Todd on many occasions, he understood Todd was just an ordinary person with no special powers. The fact that he was a werewolf was not an advantage which could overturn that life-threatening situation. In a helpless situation where Subaru would die, Todd would also lose his life. Todd Fang, he was swallowed up by that flood and had perished. As the person who, in the end, had been the closest witness to the final moment of his life, that was Subaru's conclusion. Subaru, ... Silence fell upon the cabin. Gradually, the silence seemed to burn his forehead and the nape of his neck. There was a heartache that he had to live with, it was something he had decided to take on by himself. So, after a while, as he continued to experience the sensation of his skin being burned. Katya, you didn't see the crucial part of it, did you? Then, maybe he's not dead. Her voice, faltering and cracking, caused Subaru to look up. Not only Subaru, but also Rem and Jamal, all looked at Katya in bed. She fiddled with her hair, her blue eyes quivering. Katya, what if, if you'd seen Todd's head get smashed in, or his body cut in half, or burned to a crisp, or something like that, If you'd seen it, you might think so, yes, but... Rem, Katya-san. Katya, but see, he really clings to his life. And besides, when we parted ways, he told me he would come back soon. Definitely, back to me. He would never lie. Even when he told me that my brother had died. He just misspoke, that's all. Rem, Katya-san. Raising her voice, Katya started clawing at her hair. The sight of it made Rem call out to her, and she cuddled up on the bunk to hold Katya's head. Cradling Katya's head in her chest, Rem caressed her back. Rem, slowly, breathe slowly. I am right here beside you. Katya, you're wrong. He wouldn't. That easily. Right? Right, Rem. Rem, Katya-san. Large tears streamed from Katya's eyes, soaking Rem's clothes as she hugged her. Without minding that, Rem continued to stroke her sobbing friend's back. Subaru's heart was intensely torn by Katya's honest reaction. He understood that Katya would be hurt this way by telling her about Todd. It was a really complicated relationship, but Todd's feelings for Katya were likely genuine. Katya, as well, was really cherished by Todd. That was why there were these tears. That was why Subaru did not mention the crueler truth. It was something that Rem was not even aware of. It was Rem who had finished off Todd, who had turned into a werewolf, with an axe. In order to protect Subaru, Rem had put an end to Todd. Since Todd was in his werewolf form at the time, and since he did not undo his beastification until the instant he was submerged, Rem was unaware of this fact. Moreover, Subaru had no intention of enlightening her on the matter. Subaru did not believe that the truth had any value here. Todd loved Katya, and Katya loved him back. That was what mattered. There was no reason to destroy those memories and dwell on what really happened. Subaru, Todd truly cared about Katya-san. All the way until the very end. That was the only motive without any lies that Natsuki Subaru, the target of Todd Fang's raw murderous intent, could convey to Katya or Ili. Katya, HK. Katya, sobbing, wrapped her arms around Rem's back as she hugged her, and one could see her nails digging hard into Rem's back. It was painful, but Rem took it in silence. In this cabin echoing with sobs, Rem glanced at Subaru, and shook her head. Within that gesture, Rem conveyed to leave Katya to her, and her gratitude to Subaru who had come prepared for this outcome. Jamal, sorry to make you have to play a nasty role, brat. Jamal said this to Subaru as they left the cabin, leaving Rem and Katya behind. When Subaru raised an eyebrow at Jamal's surprisingly straightforward words, He grimly wrinkled his nose with you know. Jamal, it's a tough role to inform the family of the deceased. No matter how heroically and bravely the person died, there are still those who will want to cry. Subaru, how about you? Jamal, huh? Subaru, because to you as well, Todd is your companion, your sister's fiancé, and he's someone special, right? With cheeks contorted, Jamal pondered Subaru's question. After a moment of silence, he touched the eye patch that was covering his right eye with his finger. Jamal, I don't know. If the bastard had survived, I would have laughed it off that we both failed to die, but that step completely disappeared. Well, if he died fighting, then he did his job as an Imperial soldier. Even though he severely mocked that. Subaru, .. As he said that, Jamal gave a small snort and laughed at the last part. Subaru could not tell whether it was a laugh at the thought of Todd's uncharacteristic end, or whether it was a laugh based on some kind of imperial way that Subaru did not understand. Whichever the case may be, Subaru did not feel that he could laugh at someone's death. Jamal, it's just. In front of Subaru, who was thinking that, Jamal suddenly followed up. Subaru opened his eyes wide at the tone of his voice. For what was in Jamal's continued voice was not anger or loneliness, but something more akin to anticipation. And that impression was correct. Jamal went on to say. Jamal, I don't think that son of a bitch would die so easily. What Katya said is true. I haven't seen him actually die. Subaru, that is. Yow. Jamal, shut it, brat. Regardless of what I think, that's hope for Katya. Jamal's finger flicked Subaru's forehead as he was about to involuntarily object. Having silenced Subaru, Jamal jerked his chin toward the door behind him as he said that. Subaru could not discern whether the hope Jamal spoke of was a bright one or a cruel one. However, he understood that he was not qualified to interfere. Only those who were invited and allowed to participate in Katya and Todd's lives had the right to interfere with their feelings. Subaru was not qualified to do so. Jamal, damn, for a guy who hated to fight, he had quite the hot-blooded attitude, and because of that, he crossed a far more dangerous bridge than I did. Looking up at the ceiling of the hallway, Jamal made that critique of Todd. Even though Jamal did not show his face and his voice was shaky, Subaru was still not qualified to point this out. Hello tilde, Subaru-kun, you're looking well, aren't you? You've been looking more youthful, I wonder if it's thanks to the food of the Empire? Subaru, amazing. The only person that could make such a gaudy joke after seeing me like this is Roswaal. Roswaal, oh my, no one else was calm enough to do that, right tilde? By the way, for the time being, in this place I go by the name Dudley, from now on, let's get along, okay? With his blue eye closed, leaving his yellow eye winking towards him, an expression that Subaru had not seen in a while, Subaru broke into a smile as he came face to face with Roswaal. As expected, Roswaal was unfazed as he looked at the shrunken-down Subaru, but Subaru decided not to mention that his style differed from his usual clown costume. It was a little vexing, it reminded him of when he changed his tone of voice, and intentionally omitted explaining anything. After Subaru had informed Katya of Todd's final moments, Subaru went to the middle of the coupled dragon carriages to a larger passenger car that had been prepared for him. The coupled dragon carriages, according to Subaru's prior knowledge, they were similar in structure to electric and railway trains, the likes of which could only be found in the Wallachian Empire, which was flatter than most other countries. Of course, when it came to who had the most earth dragons, that went to the kingdom of Lagunica, thus, he decided he would keep in a corner of his mind that it would probably be possible to lay out something similar, provided he chose the right terrain. Roswaal, this coupled dragon carriage, I dare say that it appears to be one of the secrets of the Empire. From what I've heard, it was invented by a member of the 9 divine generals known for their wisdom. Subaru, I knew it, I've never seen something like this in the kingdom. Thinking about it, we've seriously seen a lot of the inner workings of the Empire. Roswaal, ha ha ha, It would be disastrous if we're prevented from returning just because we peeked at the dark side of the Empire too much. From now on, I think it may be wise if we spend some time with our eyes closed. Subaru, that's no laughing matter either. Roswaal gave a hearty laugh in agreement as Subaru grumbled this. Otto wore a dismayed expression as he overheard their conversation. The passenger carriage in question was a dining car with a lot of tables, designed with enough space to accommodate roughly 20 people. However, the purpose for all of these tables was not for having a meal, but rather for discussions such as assemblies and war councils. In fact, Subaru and Roswaal were not the only ones there were many other faces as well. Of course, there was Emilia and Beatrice, who had come here earlier, sitting at the same table as Ram. Ram gave a scornful gaze to Subaru, who had come alone. Ram, little Barusu, what's up with Rem? Shouldn't you be together with her? Subaru, you really didn't need to use that prefix. Right now, Rem is with Katya-san. For this discussion, I don't think we'll be seeing her face. Ram, yes. Spilling out a sigh, Ram did not dig any further into Subaru's answer. At last, Ram had managed to meet her younger sister, Rem, but apparently they were not as clingy with each other as Subaru had thought they would be. From the get-go, he had the impression that the two of them were quite close with one another, so Subaru had hoped that the two sisters would be constantly holding each other's hands. Ram and Rem are both their own person. Don't be forcing your own selfish feelings onto us, young Barusu. It's disgusting. Subaru, don't read other people's minds. I'm not being disgusting. Ram, while Ram couldn't be around, it was the people around Rem that supported her. Don't think of belittling those relationships. Shameless, undeveloped Barusu. Subaru, let's see how long it takes for you to use up all of your variations of my nickname, Nay Summer. As his cheeks twitched at the various things Ram said and did, Subaru took a deep breath. Ram had a point. It would be no good to rush. First of all, the sisters had been successfully reunited, so they should not rush and should advance forward slowly. There was no need to worry, as there was a bond between Ram and Rem that no one could get between. He was able to believe this from the atmosphere that he had felt when they had come to visit Subaru together. Subaru, what, is this all of our members? What about Petra, Frederica, and Garfield? Emilia, Petra-chan and Frederica are taking care of the soldiers that are fighting. Garfield as well, he's also busy with the wounded. Subaru, the fighting, that's still ongoing? Emilia, yes, it is. Subaru, I think you saw a lot of them in the imperial capital. In regards to the whereabouts of the missing members, Emilia slightly hesitated with her answer. What she was about to say, Subaru could guess what it would be. Subaru, the zombies. Otto, what is that strange name? Subaru, a dead person that can move around. In my hometown, we call them zombies. I thought it would be better if they had a name, so I called them that for the sake of convenience. Otto, do you not have way too many weird things in your hometown, Natsuki-san? Otto turned a reproachful look towards Subaru, whose mouth curved into a smile. In this case, he thought about whether he should argue that this world in which zombies had actually appeared was the stranger one, or whether it was his world, in which zombies were the subject of so many works of fiction, but did not actually exist. Truly an incomprehensible matter of dimensions. Roswaal, I see, that's good, zombies. At least, we can avoid calling them corpse soldiers. Then, Roswaal cut in between Subaru and Otto's conversation. Subaru ruminated on the words corpse soldiers that came from his mouth. Subaru, something like that, it seems like it's connected to some bad memories, huh? Roswaal, that is indeed the case. It's one of the memories that I don't wish to remember. Beatrice, as discussed in the imperial capital, it's safe to say that this is the result of the sacrament of the immortal king, I suppose. According to the records, it was used most recently during the kingdom's civil war. In fact, Subaru, so that's why it's a bad memory. At Subaru's gaze, Roswaal gave a vague smile as he declined to say anything further. Roswaal had a deep knowledge of the past. Even if he himself had not participated in the Civil War, he still might have had a bad experience with the sacrament of the immortal king. Beatrice, but, as far as Betty knows, that secret art is meant to be an unstable product, I suppose. To create such a great number of zombies and reproduce it so well, it should be impossible, in fact. Subaru, but, they were actually moving and talking, so there must be some reason for it, right? Beatrice, Betty is also scratching her head, I suppose. Dudley, you shouldn't be slacking off, in fact. Roswaal, oya, I'm upset that you think that I'm slacking off. Since this also involves me, there's no reason for me to cut any corners. Besides, all of your lives are also at stake. Beatrice, Betty doesn't know how much to trust you, I suppose. Roswaal, I understand. Because your life is also at stake. Beatrice, what do you understand, in fact? You are just joking even more, I suppose. Roswaal gave this answer with his chin resting on his folded hands, causing Beatrice's face to become red as she shouted at him. Beatrice exploded with frustration at the teasing Roswaal, but even Subaru was not sure what Roswaal was truly thinking. However, since Beatrice was Subaru's partner, he pulled down his eyelid and stuck his tongue out at him. Emilia, well, I'm not really sure of the details, but is it all right if I call them zombies like Subaru? Otto, I see no problem with it. It is shorter than saying corpse soldiers. Subaru, that way of agreement is just like Otto. And so, just like that, as Subaru's conversation with the others came to a close. Bastetts, Your Excellency, according to a report I received from General Second Class Kafma, they will remain in the Gairahal tropics to keep an eye on the stragglers as much as possible. Goes, also, from General First Class Olbart, he is using delaying tactics with the Shinabis under his command. However, he said that, since their opponent has no need to resupply water or food rations, it seems that what he can do decreases by about half. Vincent, as for Kafma Irelux and Olbart Dunkelken, tell them to continue their operations as they have been doing. Serena Drakroy, what of your flying dragon ship? Serena, they have not yet returned. Hopefully the fact that it's taking longer than anticipated doesn't mean that the fortified city has fallen. Vincent, if it performs the purpose that it was built to do, the fortified city should not be unprepared, and so, with the flurry of several footsteps and important talk flying around, Abel and 3 of his imperial followers, an old man, a large man, and a beautiful woman arrived within the carriage. Subaru did not know any of their names. Otto, the old man is the Prime Minister Bastetts von Dalphon, the tall man is General First Class Goes Ralphon, and that woman is High Countess Serena Drakroy. Subaru, you saved me there. Goes, I think he's the guy that was arrested for letting Abel escape. Otto guessed the reason for Subaru's frowning profile and made his comment. Among the names that Subaru had heard from him was that of one of the 9 divine generals whose survival was supposed to be in jeopardy. He was someone who was said that he could be considered an ally to Abel if he had survived, so he was honestly happy to see him actually at Abel's side. Vincent, all of you are here. Good, then we can begin the war council. Subaru, hey, what about Flop San and the others? Vincent, if there was a shortage of manpower like at the Fortress City, it would be a different story, but, what value would the addition of a peddler provide to this war council? Otto, that is true, I wonder, why am I even here? Besides Subaru, who had tilted his head, Otto also tilted his head at what Abel said. But, the reason that Otto had tilted his head was not known by the Emilia camp, Subaru included. It was only natural for Otto to be present here. He was even laughed at scornfully by Ram with a ha. Subaru, and Tarata-san, Myzelda-san, and the others are positioned in the passenger car at the rear, so they won't be here for this discussion, right? Bastetts, yes. That is what we have heard from the people of Shudrak. They have given me a really reassuring reply that when the time comes for them to utilize their power, they will do so with full force. Goes, certainly, I never thought that I would get the opportunity to stand side by side with the people of Shudrak, renowned for their bravery and courage. If this were not a struggle for the survival of the Empire, I would be all the more excited. Damn. Vincent, you make too much noise. Keep your mouth closed, Abel silenced Goes, causing him to clench his fists, which were the size of a child's head, as he restrained himself. It was an inconsiderate remark, but since nobody paid it any attention, it was probably just a typical exchange between them. At any rate, he now understood why Flop and the people of Shudrak were not present. Emilia, Subaru, your friends from the Empire are. Subaru, I've already told everyone in the battalion that I would speak as their representative. There's something I want to discuss with everyone. Especially with Biko. Beatrice, with Betty? This doesn't feel like it's going to be good, in fact. Subaru, there. For the time being, he had asked his comrades from the Pleiades battalion to refrain from attending this meeting. After all, Subaru and Abel were both in the same cabin. With one wrong move, Whites could have attacked Abel in an attempt to hand over the throne to Subaru. The lie that Subaru was the illegitimate son of Abel, of Vincent Wallachia, that he was the black-haired crown prince, was still ongoing. He eventually needed to resolve that issue as well. Subaru, though, it would have been nice at least if Tanza were here. Subaru was the only one who was attending the meeting as a member of the battalion. He did not feel comfortable taking her out of her cabin, as she was not looking well. As was the case when she visited him, he would definitely have to talk to Tanza later. Subaru, also, I haven't seen Louis around. Ram, that girl is with Medium and Flop. You seem to have a lot of feelings for her, but what do you intend to do with her, Barusu? Subaru, we can talk about that later, too. Ram's light crimson eyes narrowed, and Subaru felt compelled to reply. Ram knew that Louis was present at the Pleiades watchtower right before Subaru and Rem were sent to the Empire. Naturally, from Ram's mouth and from Abel's, Louis's true identity would have been shared with everyone. Still, she would like to know who, along with what kind of work and effort, had made it possible for her to be on board this coupled dragon carriage. In addition, they needed to find the best compromise for Louis. Vincent, now that you have finally caught up, we shall start this war council, Natsuki Subaru. Subaru, you, don't forget that I'm holding onto an enormous scandal, okay? I mean, I guess it's like that, but not quite. Abel's attitude had not changed on the surface, even though he vividly remembered him meekly bowing his head. Using disparaging words at his attitude, Subaru put a stop to him. Still, there was a companion whose movements had not yet been confirmed. That was? Subaru, what about Priscilla? She must have been in Garrel, and wasn't she also at the Imperial capital? Besides, Tanza mentioned Yorna. Subaru asked this, as if he were saying she should have been there while looking at Abel's face. Somehow, Priscilla and her merry band of companions had come to the Wallachian Empire. Al had even accompanied him to the demon city of Chaos Flame, so he was sure that they were involved in the battle for the imperial capital of Lupagana. As for Yorna, Subaru and his group had also received information that she had joined the rebels. Tanza also felt Yorna's presence in the imperial capital. Naturally, such faces must also be on board the coupled dragon carriage. Speaking of a face he had not seen, he also had not seen Cecilus either, but Cecilus's moodiness was the same as it was before he left Gladiator Island, so he was not concerned about him. Subaru, hey? However, when Subaru asked him about them, Abel fell silent and closed one eye. Suspicious of his reaction, Subaru furrowed his brows as he looked around to see that Abel was not the only one who had such a reaction. For some reason, nobody was saying anything about Priscilla's group's movements. If Priscilla and the rest of her group had heartlessly returned to the kingdom before the siege of the imperial capital, then Emilia and the others would have been surprised to hear Priscilla's name. That was not the case. And the answer to this uncomfortable silence was Beatrice, Subaru, that was kept secret to avoid agitating you, I suppose, Subaru, Biko? Beatrice took action before he could react and squeezed Subaru's hand. Subaru's cheeks tightened at Beatrice's preamble. Then, Emilia turned her attention towards Subaru, who unconsciously held Beatrice's hand tightly. Emilia, stay calm and listen to me, Subaru. About Priscilla and Yorna-san. She paused for a beat. Emilia continued with what felt like a drawn-out answer to the anxious Subaru. That was? Emilia, when we were all fleeing together from the imperial capital, we didn't find those two. But, I want to believe that they're safe. It was a definite proof of the wounds inflicted to their side during the siege of the imperial capital. Arc 8, Chapter 14, The Kingdom and the Empire. Egotistical and self-centered, it seemed like he would never have wanted to come to the Wallachian Empire. Emilia, but Heinkel-san is also missing. Subaru, just like Priscilla and Yorna, he hasn't returned. Damn it, I don't know how to feel about this. Of course, he did not want him to die, nor did he think he should die. On the other hand, he was not a person whom he thought of fondly, so he had no reason to wish for him to stay alive beyond not wanting to make Reinhardt or Wilhelm sad. But, he had a thought about the results of him participating in that battle. Subaru, Heinkel, a man of the kingdom of Lagunica and father of Reinhardt, the Sword Saint. A situation in which that man, caught up in a battle of the Wallachian Empire, ended up losing his life. The thought of that caused even Subaru, who was not on friendly terms with him, to feel a bitter emotion. Subaru needed to return to the kingdom with all of his precious companions, no matter what. And so, it happened at the moment when Subaru had just strengthened his resolve. Otto, the circumstances of Priscilla's summer and Yorna-san are as I have told you. On top of that, I would like to make a firm statement before we start the meeting going over the future course of action. The one who began to speak after a heavy silence had fallen over the cabin was Otto. He stood up on the spot and held up one index finger to attract the attention of those around him, and Otto, as I am sure you know, we are people of the kingdom. Having acknowledged that we are responsible for crossing the border at a time when we were not allowed to cross, I will state this. Vincent, state it. Otto, yes. We have accomplished our objective. Once we enter the fortified city of Gartla, we will proceed to go northward through the Kararagai city-states, and then return to the kingdom of Lagunica. In the midst of this unprecedented crisis in the Wallachian Empire, in front of the Wallachian emperor who was undergoing the emergency of his country being brought to ruin, Otto made a clear declaration. Otto, Natsuki-san and Emily, please remain silent. That was what Subaru and Emilia were told before they could even say anything, taking the wind out of their sails. Without turning his gaze to them, Otto's statement had surprised Subaru and Emilia before they would begin to vehemently protest, and had successfully allowed him to make the first moves. Though, Subaru's and Emilia's reactions were natural. With the imperial capital in such a state of destruction, and with no knowledge of the safety of Priscilla and Yorna, it would be too extreme to make plans to return to their home country. Ram, you may call it heartless, but Ram is in agreement with Otto's plan. We retrieved Rem and, incidentally, the short-limbed Barusu. Those results are satisfactory. Emilia, Ram. HK. Ram, there's no use in giving those wistful eyes, Emily. You should also understand. It is merely that Ram's group unexpectedly accomplished this without losing anything. It's far too dangerous to go any further. In place of Subaru and Emilia, who had been ordered to be quiet, Ram gave her opinion of approval of Otto's plan. Ram, having given a cold answer to Emilia's imploring gaze, partially closed her eyes in her usual pose, sitting on a chair and hugging her elbows. Unexpectedly, they just accomplished it without losing anything. Ram was right to express it that way. As a matter of fact, they failed to bring Priscilla and Yorna back to this place. There was no guarantee that that would not happen to someone in their camp. Serena, Dudley, do you agree with your wife? Roswell, she's not my wife, but I'm generally in agreement with both of them. The one who brought Roswell to this topic with that exchange was Serena, a beautiful woman with a conspicuous white scar on her face. Was the one Serena referred to as wife meant to be Ram? While denying that allegation, Roswell concurred with Otto and Ram. Roswell, in fact, if you look only at our objectives, I'd say it was a perfect accomplishment. His limbs have become a little shorter, and the girl who was supposed to be asleep has become a tomboy, but the results are excellent. I guess withdrawing to the kingdom here would be the decision with the least fear of losses. Ram, even if Barusu's teeth haven't finished coming out, Ram says the loss is minimal. Subaru, all of my teeth have come out, damn it. Hoping for no argument, Ram ragged on her impression of Subaru's size. Regardless, given the bad course the conversation was taking, Subaru's eyes wandered around. Otto, Ram, and Roswell were the three people in the Emilia camp who had a strong voice in policy-making meetings because of their practical wisdom. Despite being the crown of Emilia's camp, it was not unusual for Emilia's and Subaru's opinion to not be accepted. Rather, it was quite common. Subaru, so the only one on our side is Biko? Beatrice, sorry Subaru, but Betty is more on their side, in fact. Isn't it far too dangerous to associate any more with the Empire, given that Subaru has shrunk, I suppose? Subaru, no way, even you. Subaru's eyes widened in shock at his partner's unexpected betrayal. However, although she looked apologetic, there was no sign of Beatrice saying it's a joke. In fact, she was saying that because she really cared about Subaru. In short, Emilia, Subaru. Subaru, it's just Emilia Tan and I. Squeezing her white hand tightly, Emilia's amethyst eyes wavered. Subaru cleared his throat at her call and broke out in a cold sweat because he was so outmatched. At the very least, if the others who were not there were present, it would be a different story. Otto, just for the record, Petra-chan agrees with us. Frederica-san is passive, but would prefer to return to our home country. Garfield is the only one on your side. Subaru, only Emilia Tan, Garfield and I. Stop joking around. Emilia, somehow I'm feeling really helpless. With their wishful thinking smashed by pragmatism, the helplessness of Subaru's and Emilia's opinion was strengthened. If this were a meeting where decisions were made by fistfighting, the presence of Emilia and Garfield would be an overwhelming advantage, but they were simply not suited to other kinds of meetings. Goes, God. What a farce. I cannot stand to watch this. It was Goes who said as much while snorting at the arguments within Subaru's group. For him, who had previously complained about Subaru's attitude towards Abel, he must have felt that all the words and deeds of his faction were disrespectful to the Emperor. Taking a large step forward, Goes picked Subaru up by the nape of the neck. He truly did, and when he plucked him up with his two thick fingers, Subaru cried wah! In astonishment. Goes, this is a matter for the Empire. If you are citizens of the kingdom and not of the Empire, then you should cross the border as soon as possible, as per the policy you have established. Your strength is not required. Subaru, wait a second. We're not quite done with our side of the conversation yet. Goes, silence. With his legs dangling in the air, a tremendous voice had struck Subaru dizzy. Even with his hands covering his ears, Goes's voice penetrated his defense as if it were a weapon. However, his argument came from his pride in being an imperial soldier, and Subaru had no reason to follow suit. Additionally, the same was true for outsiders other than Subaru. Emilia, that's enough, Goes-san. First, put Subaru down, then we can talk about this properly. Immediately, stepping forward with her hands on her hips, was Emilia. She looked up at Goes, who was holding Subaru in his hand, and communicated her firm will to him. Her attitude made Goes scowl deeply, and with his scarred face, he looked down at Emilia. Goes, and you, I see you share this boy's opinion. But the sword wolves of the Empire will accept no charity. Your help is unnecessary. Join your comrades and promptly. Emilia, that. I have a really strong objection to that. Goes, what? Emilia, you say that our power isn't necessary. But I don't think that's the case at all. Beatrice, her voice has gotten loud in the heat of the moment, in fact. Not wanting to lose to Ghos's vigor, Emilia's voice, akin to the ring of a silver bell, grew louder and louder. The beauty remained intact, but Emilia's voice sounded more like the toll of a large bell than regular ones, and when she challenged him directly, Ghos's expression twisted. Thrusting her finger towards Ghos, who wore a contorted expression, Emilia continued. Emilia, after all. Even in the battle for the imperial capital, if it weren't for me, Priscilla, and the others, everyone would have really struggled a lot more. Ghos, HK. Emilia, all of us. We were very strong, isn't that right, Bastet-san? Speaking with a loud voice, Emilia turned the conversation to Bastet's. Eyes as narrow as threads, the old man was unfazed by the sudden nomination. Yes, I suppose so, he replied, wringing the moustache around his mouth with his fingers. Bastet's, for my part, it was unexpected that the generals of the first class would be unable to succeed in their battles. If that was the contribution of these women. Serena, it feels strange to talk about things from our perspective, but the white light that was fired from the palace. It was dispelled by that girl in the dress. Bastet's, my. Cocking her chin, Serena mentioned Beatrice's achievement. Upon hearing this, Bastet's expression tightened slightly as he wondered what she had done to the light. Just before Subaru and his team arrived at the battlefield, a single shot very nearly decided the battle. Beatrice's achievement in erasing that shot was mentioned, so, as her partner, he was proud. Subaru, well, Ghos-san, the prerequisites are different now, right? You say you don't need our help, but without us, the situation would have been much worse. Emilia, yes. I don't know specifically how, but I imagine it would have been a lot worse. Beatrice, Emily, it's time to turn down the volume, I suppose. Subaru and Emilia had attacked in waves, with Serena and then Bastet's also providing support, causing Ghos's lips to twitch. It would be difficult if only Subaru and his team had insisted, but in this situation, to be acknowledged by Serena and her colleagues, who also participated in the top-level meeting, seemed to be highly effective against Ghos, who gave off a strong sense of having worked his way up as a military man. However, Ghos, I certainly acknowledge your contributions. But, in the first place, you have not concluded the most important discussions among yourselves. Subaru, that's. Emilia, that's not wrong. He gave them a reasonable counterargument, and Subaru and Emilia were disheartened. Here, even if they were able to overcome Ghos, it only meant that they had defeated an easy opponent, but it did not mean that Subaru and his allies' ideas would go unchallenged. Rather, in comparison to Ghos, there were more difficult people to convince. Otto, I know it sounds callous, but let me say this. As soon as Subaru recognized his adversary again, that opponent spoke up as if he had seen it coming. Beginning to speak in a way that gave off naught but a bad premonition, Otto looked between Subaru, who was being grabbed, and at Ghos, who was grabbing him, and Otto, as General First Class Ghos says, this is an issue for the Empire. Unlike the necessity of the situation that befell us, to get actively involved from this point on could become an international incident, interfering in the internal affairs of other countries. Subaru, Ga. HK. Otto, first of all, why would you want to interfere so badly, Natsuki-san? Whatever the case may be, it is probably due to your obligation to the people you have come to know in the Empire up to this point, or some other such thing, correct? Subaru, don't talk like you know what is going on. But anyway, is what I want really so wrong? Otto, not wrong, but I also have this to persuade you. Well, what I mean is, what if Natsuki-san takes all the people whom he cannot abandon out of the Empire? Otto was someone who aimed to solve problems through reason, so displaying that philosophy to the greatest extent, he caused Subaru's eyes to widen at the outrageous proposal he had just made. As if Ghos was just as surprised, His fingers slipped as he dropped Subaru onto the floor. Naturally, this also took Emilia by surprise. As she helped Subaru, who had fallen onto his butt on the floor, she looked over, saying, "Otto-kun." And Emilia, what do you mean by that? No way, are you really? Otto, there is no twist, that is just what I am proposing, that even in these circumstances, we should perform the reckless action of taking the people who want to come with us. Fortunately, we have the right to make the decision. Glancing over, Otto's gaze turned to Roswaal. Roswaal was supposedly hiding his identity within the Empire, but it was true that he was the most powerful man in the Emilia camp. If Otto's opinion was accepted, Roswaal would be the one to guarantee the acceptance of those seeking refuge. Then, at Otto's challenging manner, Roswaal shut his yellow eye. Roswaal, at the very least, I'm sure my employer wouldn't refuse. If it keeps them from taking a risk they don't have to take, then it's a necessary expense. Ram, since you're referring to Barusu, with his immature way of thinking, the majority of the people he's latched onto are likely those who don't have the strength to fight. They would not be people that the Empire would regret letting go of. While negotiations were happening at a daunting level, Subaru and company were left to the side as they were being talked about. Neither Roswaal's overly broad sense of self-preservation, nor Ram's speculation based on her insight into Subaru's character, found room to interject, and the conversation proceeded in a muddled manner. Otto, what do you think, Your Excellency the Emperor? If we can reduce the number of casualties in your country as much as possible, our proposal is not a bad one, correct? Vincent, a very well thought out proposal. The kind that is difficult to so easily dismiss. Otto, thank you for the consideration. Abel's words affirmed that it was a shrewd proposal, and Otto bowed socially. However, for Otto's part, it would not be surprising if he was imagining himself sticking out his tongue. Imperialism and Otto were incompatible. Not necessarily in terms of ability, but in terms of character. Like Subaru, it seemed Otto did not like the Empire. They were of the same opinion on that. The only thing Otto was doing on top of that, was organizing things based on importance. Subaru, It felt as if he had gone and fixed a hole on the ship they were meant to ride on his own, but ended up remaking the ship into a different one entirely. This ship sailed in a different direction from what Subaru had wished, but it flowed and drifted to protect the lives of Subaru's precious ones, heading for a different shore. Subaru knew that this was something that had been thought out in consideration of him and his companions. He knew that, and yet. Otto, how about it, Natsuki-san? This is the best I can do in terms of compromise and consideration. Rather than unsparingly dismissing Subaru's opinions, Otto tried to accommodate Subaru's opinions as much as possible and, at the same time, ensure their safety. He thought he was a reliable guy, but he was far too troublesome an opponent when they had a serious disagreement. He was a man who should have been given a drink and left in a drunken stupor before this discussion had occurred. To Otto's overpowered theoretical armament, how could Subaru, who only had a cypress stick, Emilia, hey, Abel, I have something I want to ask you. Subaru, Emilia-tan? Suddenly, Emilia, who must have shared the same opinion as Subaru, while also feeling the same frustration at being pushed around, approached Abel with a remark. Looking at her profile, Subaru's eyes widened. Unlike Subaru, who was forced into silence as he looked frustrated and tried to find a way out of the situation, neither Emilia's eyes nor her profile showed signs of being outmatched. At Emilia's dignified and brave call, Abel's sable eyes trained their gaze on her. Prompted by his silence, Emilia's thin lips moved. Emilia, how many people are there in the Wallachian Empire altogether? Vincent, The civil war this month has probably reduced the number considerably, but it was roughly 50 million or so before that. Emilia, I see. With a furrowed brow, Abel answered Emilia's question. Hearing his answer, Emilia let out a short breath, then raised a finger to her lips and looked at Subaru, and then. Emilia, you heard him, Subaru. Subaru, so said Emilia to Subaru. For a moment, Subaru failed to catch the meaning of the words that she gave him, and then his eyes immediately widened and his cheeks stiffened. Then, as he hesitated for a moment wondering what he should do with that which prompted such a reaction. Beatrice, Subaru, Betty has already voiced her opinion, in fact. But Subaru, Beatrice. Beatrice, Betty will always be on Subaru's side, I suppose. Holding onto Subaru's hesitant hand, Beatrice snuggled her body up next to him. Beatrice was almost the same height as Subaru, and her eyes were even closer than usual. As they stared at him, Subaru took a deep breath in and exhaled. Then, still under Emilia's expecting gaze, Subaru looked at Otto. Looking up at him, he spoke. Subaru, 50 million. Otto, what? At that blunt statement, Otto asked this back as he raised his shapely eyebrows. At that reply, Subaru's chest heaved, his cheeks contorted into a smile, and then he repeated what he had said. Subaru, you told me earlier. You told me to take all the people that I can't abandon with me to the kingdom. In that case, the ones I can't abandon are those 50 million people. Otto, HK, Natsuki-san. Subaru, I know. You're the one who's right. I'm the one who's spouting nonsense. I understand that everyone came to save me and Rem, and I get what you're saying. But Subaru thrust his hand out at Otto, who had raised an eyebrow, and while Subaru mocked himself, he could not pull his own weight. There was no way that he could have beaten Otto, Ram, and Roswell if he had been forced to reason with them. So then, Subaru would do what he could with Emilia and Garfield on his side. In other words, when faced with logic, he had become unreasonable with an emotional argument. Subaru, it's a hell of a bad situation. If we leave and the Empire is ruined, then what? Just thinking about it is enough to make me not want to eat. Otto, what about the risk that we will bear? If we save 50 million strangers, but in exchange one of us dies or sustains a wound that cannot be healed, it will be much more painful. Subaru, I'm not gonna let any of us die or get into that kind of trouble. That's an absolute. That's an absolute, so what the hell even matters past that? Subaru retorted to Otto as he quietly cornered him. Then, he looked not at Otto, but at Roswell, who was standing off to the side with one eye closed. Subaru, Roswell. You should know. My absolutes are absolutes. Roswell, I am Dudley, Subaru-kun, though it would be somewhat too dishonest for me to not nod my head to that question, given my high expectations of your absolutes. Though a bit of a roundabout way of putting it, Roswell put his hands up in response to Subaru's opinion. Even if he did not know about return by death, Roswell knew about Subaru's authority. So, the part of him that had expectations of that authority would not allow for Subaru's mood to be harmed. In the first place, if he were to fall for Roswell's cajolery here, what would become of his oath from back at the sanctuary? Emilia, Ram, please. Ram, Emily, do you at least have something to convince Ram? Emilia, I'm just trying to do my best and I just want to help everyone. So, please. On the contrary, Emilia took a ridiculously brute force approach and asked a favor of Ram. If Subaru would have done the same thing, Ram would have mercilessly smacked him with a verbal slap, but she was unable to respond effectively to Emilia's forcefulness. Then, Ram let out a small sigh. Ram would have been fine as long as Rem could be brought home. But the way that Rem is now, she's become so close to the people of the Empire. If that was to be ignored, it would be harmful to Ram's dignity as an older sister, which she has only now finally realized. Emilia, Ram, stop, it's irritating. Emilia hugged Ram, who had closed her eyes and found her own reason for compromise. Ram responded to Emilia's embrace with an unpleasant look on her face. And so, Roswell and Ram caved in a way that could only have been achieved by some hard work. However, Subaru, Otto, please. Otto, are you going to use the same persuasion by tears as Emily did? Sorry, but I am not like Ram-san. I am not foolish enough to sign a contract when I do not know what the price that I will have to pay is. Subaru, Biko is also begging you. Beatrice, Betty is also begging you, in fact. Otto, even if you have 2 or 3 people, I will not budge. Subaru urged Beatrice to join him, but Otto preemptively stopped Emilia, who was hugging Ram, from joining in again. Otto's face showed that he was completely determined to not let his decision be swayed by emotion, his stubbornness akin to the difficulty of when Subaru faced off against the maniacally obsessed Roswell. However, even if he conveyed that slanderous remark to Otto right now, he would not listen. Otto, we would only be taking a risk, there would be no advantages in going along with the thinking of Natsuki-san and the rest of you. You do not even satisfy the conditions to persuade me with tears. Ram-san, and Dudley-san as well, please do not go so easy on them. Roswell, Oya, I've been scolded. Ram, for someone of Otto's social standing, you're quite impudent. Otto spoke sternly, Roswell shrugged his shoulders, and Ram frowned. But they did not hold an opinion different from Otto's, so the two did not argue any further. In reality, if the fortress known as Otto could not be conquered, they would not be able to push past this situation. After all, merely imposing circumstances that everyone did not agree on from above, was something that neither Emilia, nor the Emilia camp, could deem as acceptable. Then, Vincent, you said that there would be no advantages. In that case, the conversation would change if there were to be advantages. Otto, It was neither Subaru nor Emilia, but Abel who had interjected. At the Emperor's intrusion into the conversation, Otto's gaze sharpened. Unlike Subaru's flippant way of talking, Otto turned his disrespectful gaze towards the Emperor. Otto, if there is any advantage, that is. What in the world do you intend on? I will say this in advance, there is no possible compensation that could make it worthwhile for us. Vincent, towards a royal candidate of the Kingdom of Lagunica, I formally request assistance. Otto, HK. At Abel's proposition, Otto's expression tightened, and he made a sound with his throat. At the same time, several expressions began to violently tremble, and more so than those of Subaru and his companions, it was those of the ones on the side of the Empire. Serena laughed at those words while Bestetz's slitted eyes widened. Then, with astonishment plastered on his face, Goes spread out his hands, and as if it were the very end of the world. Goes, please wait, Your Excellency. A request for the kingdom's assistance. Such a thing. It is completely unprecedented in this sacred Wallachian Empire. Vincent, what matter is it if there is a precedent or not? If you say that, what precedent is there for an unsightly emperor to lose the imperial capital to such an impudent bunch? Such a foolish fixation. Goes, but the soldiers and generals and citizens will lament that you have made a decision not worthy of the sword wolf if you choose to rely on the aid of another nation. I say this respectfully, but a shadow will be cast over the authority of Your Excellency the Emperor. Vincent, a shadow cast over my authority. Such a foolish concern. Towards Goz's loud complaint, Abel shook his head as he supplied that reply. At this declaration, Goz froze as his eyes widened. Looking back at Goz, Abel called out Goz Ralphon, the name of his retainer. Vincent, currently, is hollow authority without any substance what we need. That is not so. Right now, the Empire desires to be victorious. To bite off the throats of our enemies, to bathe in their blood, to gorge on their lives. Before any of that, the victory we obtain will be what shapes the Empire's tomorrow. Goes, why Your Excellency? Vincent, those who sink their fangs in and become a hindrance, they are all enemies of the law of iron and blood imposed by Vincent Wallachia. Answer carefully, Goes Ralphon. Goes, Vincent, are you my enemy? As he was asked this question quietly, Goz's entire body began to shake. Showing no signs of his struggle with Subaru back in the cabin, standing upright, there was power in Abel as he displayed his might as emperor. There was a dominant power in his gaze, in his voice, and in his very being itself, and Goz had to face that power up close and head-on, all by himself. Then, after a period of careful contemplation that must have lasted less than 5 seconds, goes, I beg your Excellency's pardon for taking up so much of your time. I am Goes Ralphon, the warhammer that will shatter the many obstacles that stand in your way. Never will I be your enemy. Vincent, if that is the case, then so be it. I am relying on your work. Strive to do better. Goes, yes sir. Nodding to Goes's boisterous answer, Abel responded with his expectation that his subjects should work at their best. After accepting it emphatically, Goes let out a thunderous sound. Perhaps it was the words that Abel had added that caused his surprise. Goes, HK, I shall give my utmost efforts. Goes wiped his face with his thick arm and pledged to Abel again in a trembling voice, while tears streamed down his face. Looking away from him, Abel glanced at Serena and Bastetts. Vincent, you two also have no objections? Serena, no. You have a look that I like, and I now feel more loyalty to His Excellency than ever. Bastetts, no, not even from me. Except that I am more than a little surprised. Vincent, Serena smiled, and Bastetts once again narrowed his eyes. After letting out a snort at their demeanor, Abel then proceeded to go forward and stand in front of Emilia. Then, he looked at Emilia, who was blinking her eyes. Vincent, you have heard me correctly, candidate for the royal selection. The Wallachian Empire formally requests the assistance of the Kingdom of Lagunica to put an end to this situation. Lend us your strength. Emilia, you know, Abel. I would certainly like to help you, too. But, I really don't know what you're talking about with this royal selection candidate stuff. Subaru, Emilia Tan, no. This is one of those times where you don't need to keep it secret. Emilia, what? Are you sure? Emilia, who looked really distressed by Abel's offer, widened her eyes. Both Subaru and Beatrice nodded back at her repeatedly, and Emilia looked at Ram, who was still in her embrace, seeking further confirmation. Then, Ram shook off Emilia's arms and pushed her away from her. Ram, yes, of course. Do what you wish, Emilia Summer. Emilia, ah. When Ram called her Emilia, Emilia was surprised as her eyes lit up. She blinked to hide her joy behind her eyelids and then turned to face Abel once again. As Abel waited for her to resume, a slight frown on his brow, Emilia cleared her throat with an ahem. Emilia, I am Emilia, just Emilia, a royal selection candidate for the Kingdom of Lagunica to decide who will become the next king. And one who wants to help the empire that is currently in danger. Vincent, This is a formal request. The Wallachian Empire would never ask for the cooperation of a person from another country, even one in such a position of great responsibility. Therefore, if this fact became public, it would serve as a tailwind for you, who is fighting for the throne in the kingdom. Emilia, geez. That kind of stuff can wait. What I want to do now is this. When Abel tried to lay out some solid logic, Emilia puffed out her cheeks. With that cute puffed-up face, Emilia presented her hand to Abel. Slowly lowering her lifted hand, Emilia offered it to Abel. Emilia, allow us to help your empire. In the end, it conversely seemed as if Emilia was the one who broached the subject. Looking down at Emilia's outstretched hand, Abel glanced toward Subaru for a moment. Subaru smiled and nodded with a wicked look on his face at the faint bewilderment arising in Abel's black eyes. Subaru, by all means, Your Excellency the Emperor. I allow you to hold my Emilia Tan's hand. Emilia, and that's why I say Subaru is mine. Emilia Riley responded to Subaru's light-hearted comment, to which Abel closed one eye and sighed. Then, his hand slowly grasped Emilia's proffered hand. Vincent, very well. I shall accept your aid. Again, in the end, this was a very Abel-like thing to say, in establishing cooperation between the two countries. And thus, Emilia and Abel shook hands, and an historical moment between the Kingdom of Lagunica and the Wallachian Empire was engraved. Subaru, Otto-san, any opinions on something of that sort? That event with the Subaru and Emilia party and the Able plus Empire party had come to a climax, their exchange ultimately reaching a handshake, yet Otto, the one who had first suggested something of the sort to begin with, had been left by the wayside. A compromise with Roswell and Ram had been found, but since Otto, for whom that had not been that case, had been left behind, the matter progressed. Subaru had been filled with trepidation. Since he was aware that he had been way out of line, he subconsciously asked Otto for his opinion, buttering him up with formal language and a polite demeanor. Otto, .. And to that inquiry posed timidly by Subaru, Otto went without replying. Too scared to look at Otto's face, Subaru found being answered with silence greatly troubling. Thoughtlessly, he hugged Beatrice to his side, their cheeks coming into contact. Subaru, what should I do, Biko? Otto won't talk to me. Beatrice, Betty understands that feeling, I suppose. From Otto's perspective, he must feel like you've played him for a complete fool. In fact, you ruined his idea, and made him look like a complete clown, I suppose. Subaru, a clown, even if he doesn't resemble Roswell that much. Beatrice, stop it, in fact. An insult that massive will only make him angrier and angrier, I suppose. Flustered and panicked, Subaru and Beatrice fumbled for a way to break the impasse, together. He wished to make amends for making Otto lose face, but just what should he do? Subaru, shall I give you a foot or a shoulder massage? Beatrice, it's like, you're apologizing for angering your parents, in fact. Subaru, because I can't think of anything else. Otto, I'm begging you. HK. With Subaru unable to come up with a decent enough proposal, Otto, having stood in silence until then before the former, abruptly pulled a chair, then sat down on it with a plop. Surprised by that sudden action, Subaru and Beatrice jumped back while still embracing one another. Certainly it was not that he had sat on the chair to have Subaru give him a shoulder massage. And, before the panicky duo of Subaru and Beatrice, Otto brought a hand to his forehead. Otto, well, have you calmed down and settled for my desired compromise? Subaru, huh? Letting out a long and deep breath, Otto massaged the skin around his eyes. Taking in the words he had declared, Subaru was left stumped, and blinking his eyes alongside a no way, he spoke. Subaru, no way you thought this would happen from the beginning. Otto, I did not think it would turn out this way, but I was eager to do something this big. Because, I did not know just how many concessions Emperor Vincent would present. But, since you and Emilia-sama would not change your opinions anyway, Natsuki-san, I needed to devise some compromises. Subaru, Faced with that nonchalant response of Otto's, Subaru's mouth was left agape. In disbelief, Subaru turned around. However, his eyes met those of Roswell and Ram. Then, those two also wore looks on their faces that said that for the most part, they had generally understood everything. Subaru, you guys are scary. Otto, how upsetting. First and foremost, it only happened because you guys were so stubborn, Natsuki-san. Subaru, I can't trust anyone besides Biko and Emilia-tan anymore. And Rem. And Louis. And Tanza and everyone from the battalion, and Flop-san and Medium-san, and Myzelda-san and the people of Shudrak. Beatrice, there was still a lot more, I suppose. While squeezing Beatrice tight in a hug, Subaru could not help but feel fear towards the meticulous mental preparation of Otto and the others of the Brainiac squad. Perhaps Abel had paid some extent of heed to their plans, but even so. Subaru, no, scary, I really can't handle this. From now on, I'll be taking the emotional approach. Beatrice, Betty does not understand that conclusion, but she thinks it would be better if Subaru took a route in which he was honest with himself. In fact, if that route is the emotional one, then Betty likes it, I suppose. Subaru, yeah, I love you too. Geez, really, finally, the shock of the Otto from earlier began to wear off, and Subaru was relieved. And, It happened just as his feelings were simmering down with that exchange. Unexpectedly, the clapping of hands rang out within the cabin. Dearie me, feels like I've just stumbled upon something incredibly delightful. So darn amazing, it's quite a big deal. Loud applause had been produced, and reflexively turning around as to see who had clapped their hands, Subaru held his breath upon spotting an unknown figure present. In a corner of the cabin, where no one had been, a tall figure now stood before anyone had been able to notice. Clapping their hands together, that person had been watching the exchange taking place until then, without anyone in the cabin having noticed their presence. Goes, who are you? How in the world did you get here? ? Darn, well, I accidentally clapped even though no one called for me. This won't do, it's a bad habit of mine to unconsciously be praising any praiseworthy children that I find. That instant, protecting Emilia and Abel behind him, Goes adopted a fighting stance. And before Goes, his expression having become blood-curdling, that person kept their indifferent attitude, as if everything were unrelated to them, biting the golden kiseru they had retrieved from a pocket, donning a shrewd smile. That figure already was terribly out of place, and even more conspicuous was their outward appearance. Nearly 2 meters tall and sporting black body hair, their blank, smiling countenance had some charm to it, and alongside their unkempt fur, they gave off the impression of a gentle black dog person. Dressed in a kimono and biting on a kiseru, having had appeared unnoticed in the coupled dragon carriages where many key figures of the empire had assembled, that existence naturally attracted the attention of all those present. ? My, y'all do seem to be quite curious about me, don't ya? Emilia, who are you? Why did you come here? While turning their gaze, the dog person scratched their head with their finger. And Emilia, protected by Goze's back, inquired so of the dog person. In response to that query, the dog person tilted their head. The shape of their mouth, lined with fangs, broke into a smile, and thus spoke. ? Well, the name's Halibel, but mind if I pop in to give a quick howdy? Thus he declared. Arc 8, Chapter 15, Admiration. Speaking in a carefree tone, the beastman scratched his head, giving a large grin as he gnawed on his golden kiseru. He had moderately long black fur and a countenance that gave off quite the affable air. Neither did his gentle way of speaking feel like it contained any malevolence, nor did his relaxed posture seem to harbor any sense of wariness as he stood. Never mind the fact that among these coupled dragon carriages, in the cabin where a conference between important figures from both the kingdom and empire was taking place, nobody among those powerful individuals included had noticed his presence. Goes, Halibel, you say? Indeed, with shivers of fear mixed into his stern voice as he muttered thus, Goes had been the one to issue the strongest level of vigilance towards that presence as he protected both his lord and his new ally behind him. He himself was one of the 9 divine generals, a military man whose name was among those of the strongest rank within this empire riddled with warriors, that of general first class. That very Goes had not perceived the invisibility of the beastman who now stood before his eyes. But that fact alone was not the entire reason for the stiffness of his voice. Vincent, the admirer, What business does the cornerstone of the city-states have here? Shielded by Goze's back, staring beyond that large body and fixing his eyes on the beastman, on Halibel, Abel inquired so. Perhaps it was the well-known alias of this dog person that he had uttered before he asked his question. For some reason, Subaru felt like he had heard it somewhere before, and in his surprise, he fumbled around for it within his box of stirred-up memories. Thereupon, as Subaru knit his brows, Halibel, displaying his smile, shifted his thin eyes towards him. Halibel, if you have to think about it that hard, then the name ain't too much of a big deal. Well, that's just what they be callin' me since I like to give lots of praise, and something like the cornerstone can be chalked up to 'em overestimatin' me. Subaru, overestimating. Halibel, yep. It's just 'cause in Kararagai, there ain't nobody stronger than I am. Halibel gave his response in a calm manner, as if he were simply discussing the weather. Subaru gazed in wonder at those words of his. The instant his mind processed the word Kuraragai, that which he had been stuck on just a moment ago was suddenly ignited with understanding. The admirer of the Kuraragai city-states, the meaning of that nickname was Goes, the strongest shinobi of the Kuraragai city-states. For what reason have you boarded this dragon carriage? The next moment, stepping down on the floor of the dragon carriage with enough force to cause an explosion, Goes thrust his weapon, his mace, towards Halibel as the latter stood still. Goes' weapon was a mace of peculiar shape, something like a long spear with a spiked orb attached to its tip in order to strike. It was similar to the morning star that Rem had once loved to use, but its size and weight were overwhelmingly disposed towards an item that belonged to Goes. Anyhow, upon the sudden appearance of the city-states' strongest, the Empire's military man took the stance of thrusting his weapon forth. Perhaps it may have seemed that at this rate, things would be plunged into an explosive situation. However, Halibel, I was the one who caused all this stir, so maybe it ain't my place to be saying this, but come on now, can't we all just sit round and chat without getting all fired up? Goes, NGH, Gah. Nimbly tilting his head as the mace was thrust towards him, Halibel began to speak. Goes' face stiffened upon hearing Halibel's words, and the arm that he had funneled power into trembled. Against the edge of the golden mace wielded by Goes, Halibel held his Kiseru of similar golden hue. With just that, Goes' weapon became unable to make even the slightest of movements. Goes, lightly, Halibel had exquisitely controlled the balance of power that he put into the Kiseru and suppressed Goes' mace from moving up, down, left, right, and of course, from thrusting forward. No matter how Goes tried to move his weapon, the Kiseru would apply pressure from the opposite side to prevent it from moving. It was not simply brute strength, rather, it was the utmost pinnacle of technique to perfectly control the flow of his strength. Goes, you. HK. Goes' face reddened, and the sound of his grinding teeth could be heard reverberating throughout the cabin. But, even when compared to Goes' teeth grinding, the series of deeds Halibel was carrying out was far too quiet. At that point in time, the existence known as Halibel was wrapping up his evaluation of this place. Vincent, cease this, Goes. Besides, if he had the intention to harm us, he would have lopped the heads off of everyone here long before making his presence known through the likes of applause. Emilia, since you didn't do that, that means you're not our enemy. Right? Witnessing Goes and Halibel's quiet offense and defense, both Abel and Emilia interjected. Just as both had said, in reality, if Halibel had felt like it, it would not have been strange for everyone inside the carriage to have been killed before they had even become aware of his presence. With that pointed out, Halibel's large mouth relaxed into the shape of a smile, and Halibel, yep, I'm delighted that you're able to understand. Regardless of Emperor San, a half-devil child being so upfront, you must be quite the good lassie. Even though you're hated by others just like I am, you've been raised to be honest. Your folks must have been quite the admirable people. Emilia, thank you. I also think that I am quite fortunate to have been raised by Puck, Mother, and Juice. As Emilia placed her hand upon her chest and spoke her thanks, Halibel nodded and retracted his Kiseru. That instant, Goes' specialized weapon was released, but he did not then do anything reckless such as swinging back at Halibel. Although he was frustrated, Goes kept firm vigilance on Halibel, and Goes, if you go against those previous words, I will defeat you, even if it costs me my own life. Remember that. Halibel, I ain't gonna do such a thing, really, I ain't. Looky here, I'm sittin' all nice and well behaved after all. Waving his hands about, Halibel pulled up a chair next to him with his tail, and then hugged one of his knees as he sat down for a bit. He was someone around as tall as Goes, but when he curled up his slim figure like that, his impression of being a large breed of dog became stronger. It did not seem like his statement about good behavior was sarcastic. Roswell, be that as it may, I did not expect Kuraragai to intervene here, Tilda. Even if not to the same extent as the Kingdom and Empire, I haven't heard that the city-states ever got along well with the Empire. Much less, when considering the matter of your officially disclosed position, in particular. Halibel, oh, do all y'all know about me? Gosh, it's embarrassing since it kinda feels like I'm a celebrity somehow. Subaru, Roswell, when you say that person's officially disclosed position Ram, Barusu is as ignorant as he appears, so Ram will inform him. The admirer, Halibel, is a wolfperson. A wolfperson, upon receiving that information from Ram, for an instant, Subaru's heart and body trembled. However, that was not in response to Halibel, who was in front of him, rather, the reason he trembled was a separate matter. That which Ram had informed him of in itself did not really help Subaru to suddenly understand anything, either. But, without paying heed to Subaru's lack of understanding, the conversation continued as common sense would have it. Vincent, you ought to be aware of the Empire's attitude regarding wolf people. To then cross the border and set foot in here, you truly appear to be considerably reckless. Halibel, course I knew that, though I ain't got all too good a feelin' 'bout it. But, you all should also know the reason that I ain't hidin' the fact that I'm a wolfperson, 'cause ain't nobody's able to kill me. From the looks of it, seems like Cecilus ain't here either. Subaru, dash. Hey, do you know about Ceci? Halibel, Oh, I do know him, yeah? After all, he came to try and kill me once. Though for some reason, after throwing down for a bit, he said something like seems like the conclusion shall not be now. And he went back home. Though the topic of the conversation had deviated from the matter of wolf people, Halibel answered Subaru's question without modesty. It was an unexpected response, and an unexpected point of contact. Cecilus and Halibel had once fought in a death match, and judging from the current conversation, it seemed like Cecilus had been the one to pick the fight, but that was also easy to believe. Moreover, Bastet's, in the Wallachian Empire, which exemplifies its resolute stance towards wolf people, appears the most well-known, most powerful individual from the Kararagai city-states. In addition, he has discourteously done so inside the very cabin where His Excellency Vincent is present. Serena, if I may add, he has grasped the contents of an important conference between our country and the kingdom. Oh my, is this not a situation that warrants a decapitation, even if it means kindling the blue lightning? Roswell, Serena, could you not put everyone currently present in danger with your poor tastes? Taking advantage of Bastet's summary of the situation, Serena added on her dangerous opinion with good humor. The extremity of her words was to the extent that Roswell reflexively cast a warning true to his feelings. With that, the initial surprise and fervor from Halibel's sudden appearance had more or less faded, and the original question was then returned to. Vincent, there shan't be a third time. On what business have you come, admirer? Regardless of whether or not Halibel was intimidated by the armed might of those present, the word flattery would not exist in Abel's lexicon. Witnessing the owner of a dictionary who had intentionally blotted out all words of humility and modesty, Subaru gulped as he wondered how Halibel would respond, but, contrary to the rising tension, Halibel remained seated as he rested his chin upon his hands on the table, and Halibel, there ain't no need to be so tense, I said what I came to do right back at the start, didn't I? That I was just wondering if it would have been okay for me to pop in to give a quick howdy. Subaru, by that howdy, do you actually mean something like ripping out all of our hearts instead of actually greeting us? Halibel, zoinks. You sure think up some frightening stuff, kid, now don't ya? I wouldn't do such a thing. Beatrice, in that case, you're saying that your objective really was to just say your greetings and make your appearance, I suppose? Halibel, that's right. Protesting Subaru as he fearfully tried to probe into the shinobi style of greetings, Halibel also gave an indifferent reply to Beatrice's question after she had continued for Subaru. Having come this far, it truly seemed like Halibel had no intentions of engaging in violence. Otto, in the first place, he is someone who can kill us without needing to take roundabout means. Would it not be in bad taste to do something like taking our lives after toying with us up until here? Subaru, I was also scared, but you shouldn't pull that kind of opinion out of people. But, if that's so. Emilia, if that's so. Did you think of something, Subaru? Gulping down his saliva, Subaru had imagined something frightening upon understanding Halibel's attitude. Having been questioned about that by Emilia, assuming his mental image of Halibel's character was as the person himself had answered. Subaru, if both Reinhardt and this person are truly upright, then that predicament with Ceci was. Vincent, cease this, Natsuki Subaru. Your cooperation may have been requested, but I have no memory of permitting you to investigate our country's scandals. Bursterts, scandals. Personally, I would be unable to list all of the cases with General First Class Cecilus, either. Regarding the matter of Cecilus's humanity, not only Subaru and Abel, but even Bustetz, all saw eye to eye. Although he was not present here, Cecilus was being spoken of disparagingly, but most likely, if he was here, Subaru had confidence the same things would still be said about him. In reality, it was very Subaru-like to have the fantasy that the strong would show appropriate behavior, so in that respect, the conduct of Reinhardt and Halibel was ideal for him. On the other hand, he also believed that if Cecilus had not been present on the Gladiator Island, things would not have gone so well, so it was a tale of how everything has its pros and cons. Emilia, so? In the end, what was the objective of your greeting? This dragon carriage is going north, but the Kuraragai border is still further ahead. That shouldn't be enough to incur your caution, right? Halibel, tilde, it'd probably be a whole lot faster if you ask my employer about that instead of me. Things have gotten a little complicated since I messed up by carelessly clapping my hands. Seems like it should be any time now, though, Emilia, any time now. Halibel's eyes had looked pleased with a hint of embarrassment, however, he lifted his face upon realizing something, and drawn in by that, Subaru followed his gaze. His wolf face had turned towards the door connecting to the adjoined carriage. Exactly 1 beat later, someone knocked on the door from the other side. Excuse me for interrupting the meeting. There is something I need to report. With that, a voice that he had heard before declared thus, and Abel silently commanded him to enter. The door opened, and in came the figure of a small man with fluffy hair. The instant that Subaru saw him, his eyes widened. Subaru, Zika-san. Thank goodness, you're all right. Zika, indeed, there is no need to worry. It is most wonderful that you are also safe and sound, Miss Natsumi. Subaru, to still refer to me like that even when I'm in this form. Both when they had met and when they had parted, the man had given a smile to the cross-dressing Subaru, and upon seeing the Imperial General Second-Class Zika Osman alive and well, Subaru patted his chest in relief. Then, Zika's smiling expression tightened up, and... Zika, Your Excellency, there is something I must report. But, that individual over there. Vincent, ignore him for the time being. Likely, he is not unrelated to your report. Abel was unkind to Zika's concern about the presence of Halibel, who was in the corner of the cabin. But, Zika was accustomed to the Emperor's suppression of words, and nodding with a yes sir. Zika, High Countess Drakroy's flying dragon ship has returned. With them were brought leading figures from the fortified city of Gartla, as well as visitors from the city-states. Vincent, visitors from the city-states. Abel muttered thus as he directed his sable eyes towards Halibel. Since the destination of these coupled dragon carriages was the fortified city of Gartla, it was natural that the relevant people there had come here via flying dragons. If they were accompanied by people from Kuraragai at the same time, it would likely be impossible for that to be unrelated to Halibel. In other words, Emilia, Halibel-san, did you come ahead of those people? Halibel, well, I ain't too good with heights. Regardless of whether his cute words were meant to be a direct answer or not, Halibel had affirmed that the information Zika had brought was connected to himself. Even if Subaru could understand that Halibel was bad with heights and hence had not boarded the flying dragon ship, he felt like he could not understand how Halibel was then able to arrive faster than the flying dragon ship, but there was no point in saying something like that to the superhumans of this world. Even Cecilus could run faster than something flying in the air, so it was kind of the same thing. In any case, Serena, they even took the trouble of getting on my flying dragon ship. Then, shall we be expecting some very influential people to come bringing some very important things to say? Zika, at the very least, the pretty visitor said so herself. Vincent, judging from how you speak, it is a woman. Zika's report was easy to understand, that a woman had come from the Kuraragai city-states. Subaru tilted his head in puzzlement at the matter, but for some reason, his friends reacted differently. Beatrice tightened her grip on his hand, looked over towards Emilia, and Beatrice, Emilia, it's the subject of visitors from Kuraragai, in fact. Emilia, yes, indeed. Perhaps, that could be. Subaru, eh? Eh? Do you two happen to know something? It happened right as Subaru had tried to finish his question. Somehow, even though people have gone through the hardships of Hurrian all the way Tarthar Empire, aren't you saying some rather heartless things, Natsuki-kun? Subaru, -- Unexpectedly, a voice interrupted, its elegant timbre coming from behind Zika. It seemed like that visitor was waiting on the coupler of the adjoined carriage, but they must have had quite the sharp ears in order to participate in this conversation. But he was satisfied with those sharp ears. After all, merchants were people who always had to be straining their ears for chances to make profits. Bastetts, Your Excellency, what shall be done? Upon the reality that that voice had heard the matters being discussed, Bastetts asked for Abel's opinion. At that question, Abel glanced towards Subaru, and ascertained his expression. Then, Abel looked towards the door from which the voice had been heard. Vincent, somehow, it seems that you are not merely a boorish and presumptuous fellow. Present yourself. Visitor, then I ain't gon' refrain. Gaining the permission of the Emperor, the owner of the voice gently responded. And, before anyone could notice, Halibel, standing upright next to the door, opened the door of the carriage with his hand, showing the visitor inside. Seeing Halibel's consideration, the person, now visible, smiled with a thank you, and then, Visitor, been quite a while since we last came face to face, but I'm real glad to see you're doing well. Subaru, oh. Visitor, even so, Emilia-san and the rest of y'all are quite the experts at happening cross troublesome situations, looks like you're gon' need our strength yet again. With an informal tone and wearing a smile, and having given a merciless evaluation, with her light purple hair all tied up, and her arms through the sleeves of her kimono, it was a woman clad in a fox scarf, Anastasia Hoshin. By her side followed her attendant, a young man dressed in Japanese-style clothing. Subaru, Anastasia-san and Julius? Two people who he had never thought he would meet here. Subaru was taken aback upon seeing them. Upon Subaru's capsized voice, Anastasia placed her hand over her mouth and smiled, and the young man whose name was called out, Julius, traced the fierce scar underneath his left eye with his finger, and looked at Subaru. And then, Julius, I had wanted to say that I am glad for your safety, but why is there always something up with you? Subaru, don't say stuff like I'm always causing trouble on the level of turning small. Upon their reunion, instead of joy, it was an angry voice that had erupted. As all strength vanished from his knees, he fell forward and collapsed onto the ravaged plain. Lacking even the willpower to support his body, the ground mercilessly crashed into his face. He felt the pain of his nose being crushed as blood flowed out from his busted lips. Taking that blood upon his tongue, the bone-dry interior of his mouth was ever so slightly moistened. Not even the slightest bit of strength remained in any part of his body. If he had lost all willpower, then his physical strength would not take long to vanish entirely, either. And now that both had completely run out, he would probably rot away and die upon the very spot on which he had collapsed. Absolutely everything, absolutely anything and everything, had been in vain. The things that he had tried to do, the things that he had been enraged that he needed to do, the things that he had continued to do purely out of habit, absolutely all of it had been in vain. In the end, he could not possibly be anything other than himself. The thing called hell was something that existed within him. In that case, there was no way that he could ever escape it. There was nobody who could escape it. Nobody could escape from the hell bearing the name of oneself. God. Damn it. Vexation leaked out in a parched voice from his lips. At this point, not even tears would well up anymore. Neither did he have the passion, nor the qualifications for such a thing. Everything was so damn bizarre. It was not a place that he could reach. Reaching out toward a place he could not reach, that had been the biggest mistake of his life, and yet, he did the exact same thing again. There was no introspection. That was why he could do nothing but regret. There was no chance that he would ever be able to like somebody like himself, so he could do nothing but hate who he was, until finally, he grew to utterly loathe his very being. He was not even able to continue to love those whom he loved. Enough already, failures who were as fucking worthless as himself should just hurry up and, oh? Thought I'd just strip all the possessions off a dead body, but to think you still got some breath in ya. That deserves a bravo, bravo. Suddenly, above the head of the collapsed body, somebody's voice could be heard. His body lacked the energy to make even the slightest of movements, but the owner of that voice reached out their hand and rolled him over. Instantly, his vision was plunged into the glare of the clear blue sky, and he groaned with The tears that had not emerged from his disgrace and repentance, now gradually began to well up. That was overwhelmingly frustrating. Absolutely everything, every last inch of this body, would they really only function for the sake of himself, and nothing else? Stranger, are ya frustrated about something, Mr. Collapsed? Buddy, with your whole body still alive and well, it'll be nothing more than a blink of an eye. To think. I'm still alive. Stranger, whoa there, so it's the type where you've gotten fed up with living? My. As far as I'm aware, there's only one way to fight off those kinds of gloomy thoughts. He felt the owner of the voice give a smile, and their upside-down face cut into the clear blue sky reflected in his own vision. He had a hard time seeing the face due to the glare from behind, but he understood that the person was smiling with a broad grin on their face. Although, that grin was not something that was ridiculing him, and therefore it was a smile which he was unable to comprehend the reason behind. However, what are we going to do? If he could not find the answer within himself, he would inquire about the thoughts of the person who was incomprehensible to him. At the very least, while cursing himself for still wanting to be saved, he inquired to see if he could hear an answer that was much more respectable than he was. Hearing that question, the person deepened their smile as if to say he had hit the nail right on the head, and then, Stranger, isn't it obvious? We're off to drink tons of booze, enough that we could bathe in it. Right after answering, the person grabbed him by the collar, and began dragging him along through sheer force. A man, stretching out both of his legs, quickly moved across the wasteland. Using the fact that he was unable to resist as an excuse, the man hummed and sang while he pulled him along, and Stranger, I'm Rowan, the stingy Ronan. What about you, buddy? Rowan, buddy, you've gotta at least have a name, right? It ain't gonna get any worse even if you tell me. Easygoing and overfamiliar, witnessing the attitude of the man who gave his name as Rowan, he took a long breath. He had no obligation to answer, but neither did he have any special reason not to answer. A man, while thinking that he no longer cared about what became of himself. It's Heinkel. Thus, with neither of them realizing the position of the other, Heinkel Astria gave his name. He could not have known. That coincidence and predestination were some old tricks that fate always liked to make use of. Arc 8, Chapter 16, The Undead Cataclysm. Pale skin drained of complexion, and golden halos housed in the center of dark eyeballs. With the sudden appearance of undead forces, both the Imperial Army and the Rebel Army had been doused with literal cold water as they fought a battle for the Imperial capital of Lupagana. Before anyone could notice, the battle between the living vying for control of the empire had transformed into a struggle for existence between the living and the dead, and it was becoming increasingly severe. Yura. Raising a loud voice, he brandished his two-handed sword and slammed it into the enemy in front of him. In an attempt to block the strike, the enemy raised a battered sword that they had picked up from somewhere, but that blow smashed the brittle sword nevertheless, cleaving straight into the enemy's skull. Their cranium shattered, and yet what followed was not a spectacular scene of blood and brain matter spewing out, but a scene of fragments scattering about, as if a ceramic pot was smashed, an utterly unthinkable way for a human to die. The things were not only inhuman in appearance, but even the way they died ran contrary to the path of humanity. As somebody who lived in the Empire, there were opportunities to lay eyes upon races that possessed extravagant features in their appearance, but even if it was an opponent with a different number of arms or eyes, the way they died would remain constant. It was only logical that those with life should experience their lives come to an end in a manner befitting that quality. But these undead did not have that. Perhaps that was why he still felt such a strong repugnance towards them. Even in the Empire, where life was even said to be cheap compared to other countries, they did not trample upon life itself in the way these undead did. General, keep the front lines at bay. Let His Excellency the Emperor and the civilians escape. Soldiers, oh! When one of the generals shouted a command, the soldiers around him roared as if they were in a fever. As a result of the undead forces, the rampage of the Cloud Dragon, and the bulwark of the reservoir in the northern part of the imperial capital approaching destruction, His Excellency the Emperor made the decision to abandon the imperial capital, and withdraw all troops. The imperial army united all of its efforts to assist in the evacuation of the emperor and the citizens of the imperial capital. Ironically, with the advent of this third faction, the battle against the rebel army had gone undecided. No distinction remained between the regular army and rebels, and with the living and the dead divided into friend and foe, the fierce battle raged on. Just now, the imperial soldier who had just destroyed a single undead was one who held their ground. He and the soldiers around him were fighting with all their might to stop as many of the undead as possible, even if only one, and see if they could take them down to meet death together. Soldier, no idea what those things are. But soldier, if it is His Excellency the Emperor. Soldier, he will absolutely find a way to eradicate you lot. No matter who the enemy may be, their faith in the apex of the empire, Vincent Volachia, would never waver. That was the greatest reason why the soldiers were able to hold their ground without a hint of fear. Vincent had continued to deliver results. The amount of spilled blood and piled-up corpses of Vincent's enemies was the foundation of the imperial soldiers' faith in him. Considering the absoluteness of his reign, his fighting spirit was of a different purity from that of those who so casually plotted insurrection. And thus, his fighting spirit directed towards the undead shaking the empire was precisely the same. General, HK. All troops, bring that one down. The general cried out once more in response to the onslaught of an undead with a massive body. A bald undead of large build swung their arms about, and the imperial soldiers who stood in their path were blown away like scraps of paper. If they were to permit the large undead to do as it pleased, a hole would open in the front lines, and the defensive position they had gone through so much trouble to form would likely crumble. In order to stop it, the soldiers obeyed the general's order and leapt towards the huge body at once. Soldier, you, ooh. The soldier who leapt first was struck, crushing his head, evading that carcass as it flew towards him. One imperial soldier kept close to the ground as he slashed at the legs of the huge undead. The attack connected, and his opponent's stance collapsed. But, having perpetrated such an impudent act, the imperial soldier's eyes met golden halos looking down on him, and witnessed the dim gleam of a sword that had been plucked off somebody else. Just before he was impaled by its tip, the figure of a person wedged their way in front of the imperial soldier. General, finish. It. HK. Pierced through the chest, the general cried out as blood frothed at his mouth. Shielded by the general, the Imperial soldier gulped down, and immediately jumped out from behind the general's back. Swinging his sword with all his might, he smashed the gigantic undead's head in. The sword broke in half upon impact, but without any counterattack, the large undead's whole body shattered, and so, just as the general collapsed to the ground on his back, the large undead was struck down. His chest pierced, the general had met his end, and as the Imperial soldier admired that bravery, he borrowed a replacement for his broken sword from the general's hand. Then, twisting his head around, he tried to search for the next enemy. Imperial soldier, fucking hell. The Imperial soldier muttered, his cheeks contorting as he lowered the helmet he was wearing with his fingers. Having just evaded death, the Imperial soldier looked as the next undead entered his field of vision, the general who had just died protecting him. His same equipment and face were worn by it. The corpse of the general was lying beside him, and he himself was gripping the general's sword. And yet, standing in front of him with a pale face and golden eyes, was that very same general. Imperial soldier, fucking hell. A battlefield where even one's comrades in arms could become undead, turning into enemies as soon as they died. Upon these flooded lands which he wanted to curse, where death was near certain, the Imperial soldier raised his sword, and continued to fight until his life no longer allowed. The coupled dragon carriage retreated from the Imperial capital of Lupagana and headed towards the fortified city of Garkla. The historical alliance formed between the Emilia camp and the Wallachian Empire's leadership within that carriage had unexpectedly encountered interference in an unforeseen manner. Although, as for the cause of that interference, Anastasia, what's wrong? Even though we were so worried about Natsuki-kun. It's distressing to see you looking at us like we're uninvited guests. Subaru, I'm not making such a face. I'm happy that we were able to meet properly. It goes without saying for Anastasia-san, but even if it's Julius with his stern expression, I'm glad about both. Anastasia, well, it ain't exactly a stern expression, but it's all 'cause of your appearance. And so, the two people, Julius and Anastasia, who had suddenly boarded the interconnected dragon carriage, looked down at the shrunken Subaru from head to toe with keen interest. Naturally, for Subaru, encountering the two of them, there was like a bolt from the blue. The level of surprise was comparable to when Priscilla had suddenly descended from the sky in the fortress city. However, why those two had ended up in the Wallachian Empire, Subaru did not consider himself so naive as to be unable to guess the reason. Subaru, even so, I understand that Emilia-tan and the others were looking for us, but for Anastasia-san and Julius, to go out of your way through Kararagai just for me? Anastasia, yep, exactly. Was a grand adventure, traversing through 3 countries. Crossing the border to Wallachia ain't something that can be done easily, and the journey was quite costly, to say the least. Subaru, Anastasia, I hate to come across as counting every penny, but I'd be happy if you won't forget about the costs we broke our backs for. Being sent to the Empire was beyond Subaru's control, but when he heard about the concerns that were expressed for him, his heart felt heavy. Under Anastasia's gaze and words, it seemed like Subaru was about to be burdened with a tremendous debt of gratitude. However, at that moment, a voice calling her Anna could be heard near Anastasia's neck. Echidna, you shouldn't bully Natsuki-kun recklessly. Considering his current appearance, no matter how you look at it, Anna, you seem like the villain bullying a child. Subaru, When Subaru raised his eyebrows at that voice, the other party responded by wagging a white tail. It was the fox scarf that Anastasia, who was dressed in a kimono, had draped over her shoulders. In other words, it was Echidna, the artificial spirit, whom Anastasia was carrying with her. Unlike the witch with the same name, Subaru had a recognition of Echidna as a companion whom he had gone through the ordeal of the Pleiades watchtower together with. Hearing her voice, Subaru also felt relieved and at ease. With this, among the companions who had gotten separated in the Pleiades watchtower, once Subaru showed his face to Patrash, who was outside, only Meili would have yet to see that he was safe. Anyway. Emilia, Anastasia-san. Julius, 2. You made it to Wallachia safely. Anastasia, I'm relieved that Emilia-san and the others are safe too. As for the hardships during the journey, I couldn't find Natsuki-kun before Emilia-san and the others did, so it's a bit embarrassing. Emilia, no, that thought makes me feel really happy. Thank you. Emilia also welcomed Anastasia's appearance with a relaxed smile on her face. Indeed, the situation in the Wallachian Empire already tense, and on top of that, there was the undead disaster following the civil war. Inadvertently, she could say that she was very grateful that she did not cross paths with Anastasia and the others in the imperial capital. And with the joy of such an unexpected reunion coming to a pause. Vincent, are you quite finished rekindling your old friendship? Whether you know it or not, the time for the military conference is limited. The one who dampened the mood with those words, with a cheeky attitude and arms crossed, was Abel. With an unusually tolerant demeanor, he had been trying to gauge the atmosphere, but it seemed like he could not remain silent any longer. Making a sarcastic remark, Abel glanced sideways at Subaru and then said, Vincent, another of your acquaintances. How unexpected, to think your influence has spread as far as Kuraragai. Subaru, as for that, it's a bit complicated. Anastasia-san and the others are on the Kuraragai side, but not exactly on the Kuraragai side. So, what's the deal with him? Subaru's puzzled question stemmed from the presence of Halibel, who stood beside Anastasia and the others. Halibel, the wolf person who was known as the strongest in the Kuraragai city-states, demonstrated his existence while shaking the kiseru he held. Subaru wondered what position Anastasia and her group held, given Halibel's title and affiliation. Julius, I will handle that explanation. I will give a first-hand account of the particulars that allowed us to get on that flying dragon ship. In response to Subaru's question, Julius brushed the scar beneath his left eye with his finger and began to answer. The new white scar on Julius's profile, combined with his unfamiliar appearance in a traditional Japanese outfit, emphasized his dignified and handsome aura, giving Subaru a strange sensation. It was not to say that the influence of regression had not affected Subaru's perception, but it was probably more due to the changes on Julius's side that caused this sensation. Somehow, it felt like the current Julius had more composure than before. While there was elegance in his previous demeanor as the finest of knights, it seemed to be different from his current composure. It might have even been considered something that stood in stark contrast to it. His attitude, which seemed like he had discarded long-worn armor, was it a result of the experience in the Pleiades watchtower, or was there some other reason behind it? That remained uncertain. Julius, Your Excellency the Emperor Vincent Wallachia, I am relieved to see you safe and well. It is an unexpected honor to have the privilege of an audience with you once again. Ignoring Subaru's impression, Julius, having taken a step forward, bowed as he elegantly spoke. Abel, protected by Goze's large build as he stood, raised his shapely eyebrows at Julius's greeting. Subaru, too, harbored a sense of unease with Julius's once again part. Vincent, once again you say, But, neither do I remember granting audience to a swordsman of the city-states, nor do I recognize your face. What prompted you to say once again? Julius, with all due respect, I once received the opportunity to have a glimpse. However, at the time, I was not a swordsman of the city-states, but a knight of the kingdom. Vincent, the kingdom. Upon hearing the response of Julius, who did not show fear even when addressing Abel, the Wallachian emperor, Abel's black eyes narrowed in deep thought, but he could not seem to find any memory of the occasion. With such a dignified demeanor, there was no way that Julius could possibly be telling a lie. As such, even though the two were actually acquainted with each other, Abel had forgotten it. In other words, it was evidence that the effects of gluttony, which caused those around Julius to forget him, had yet to be undone. Vincent, you are deceiving me, and thus I do not understand your behavior. Bastetts. Bastetts, yes. I, too, have no recollection of ever seeing this person. Vincent, it would be rare for Bastetts to not be present at an audience. That is to say, it is not an issue between you and I, but one of a larger scale. By merely questioning the presence of Julius within Bestetz's memories with a single word, Abel detected that extraordinary circumstances were entangled in the discrepancy of perceptions between himself and Julius. Witnessing Abel's speech and conduct, Subaru could not help but mutter, "Is this guy for real? Subaru, is it really normal to accept that so easily? Something that's so absurd." "Vincent, we are in the midst of an emergency, in which the dead have risen, and the Emperor is being driven away from the imperial capital. Speaking of the grand scheme of things, the fact that your body has shrunk does not make much of a difference either. What matters is whether or not it can be conceived as possible. Subaru, I wouldn't say that me shrinking is something that happens every day either though. No matter what kind of profound mysteries this world held, even if those were deemed as plausible theories just because they could be conceived, it did not make them things that could be so easily accepted with an "ah yes, I see." As Subaru's brow wrinkled, Beatrice, holding his hand, rubbed the wrinkle between Subaru's brow with her other hand. "Beatrice, don't overthink it too much, I suppose. It's much more convenient if they have the tolerance to accept it, than if they were to be obstinate about it, in fact." "Subaru, that's true. Also, that feels good, please keep doing it a little longer." "Beatrice, roger that, I suppose." While Subaru continued to receive an eyebrow massage from Beatrice, Julius, with the questions that arose from the first act of his greeting cancelled, he returned to the main topic, that was? "Julius, first of all, the lady present here is Anastasia Hoshin Summer. I presume you have already been made aware of Emilia Summer's identity and status, but Anastasia Summer is also of the same status. Serena, ho, the same as Miss Emilia. In other words, candidates for the next king of the kingdom are together in a foreign country. My goodness, that's quite the amusing and rare situation." Serena contorted her facial scar in amusement, and Julius nodded silently at her words. At his affirmation, the gazes of the imperial camp members turned towards Emilia, and meeting those gazes, her lips formed a smile. "Emilia, yes, Julius is telling the truth. Anastasia San and I are both candidates for the royal selection, and we're friends. Anastasia, though for the time being, the thing bout being friends is an agreement for after the royal selection is over. Following that introduction, I'm a representative of Kararagai's Hoshin Trading Company and one of the candidates for the royal selection in the Kingdom of Lagunica. Vincent, in addition to that impressive title, you are yet another person of the kingdom? Anastasia, I feel a little sorry if my title happened to surprise ya, but to tell ya the truth, it ain't the only title I got right now. That's the reason we went out of our way to ride that flying dragon ship, ain't it?" Just a short while ago, Abel had formed a friendly alliance with Emilia as the head of the empire. As Abel expressed his disapproval at the fact that another person from the kingdom had now become involved here, Anastasia put a stop to that. As Anastasia noted that she had a title that had yet to be disclosed, Emilia put her finger to her lips with a puzzled look on her face. "Emilia, but Anastasia San is a representative of the trading company, a candidate for royal selection. And there's still more? Oh, maybe the employer of the mercenary group that Mimi and the others are a part of? Anastasia, the Iron Fang's under the jurisdiction of the Hoshin Trading Company, so I don't bother to add it to the title of Trading Company representative. Still, it's a separate matter from that." Emilia, separate. Told that she was incorrect by Anastasia, Emilia muttered in an adorable, troubled voice. And beside Anastasia, as she smiled at Emilia's behavior, Julius gestured to her with his hand. "Julius, on this occasion, Anastasia Summer is acting on behalf of Kararagai's League of Cities, appointed as an emissary. She has made her way to the Empire." "Otto, the Kararagai League of Cities?" Hearing Julius's reply, it was Otto whose voice had capsized. Otto broke his silence with an uncomfortable expression, to which Subaru thought was the right opportunity to ask, "What's the League of Cities?" "Subaru, I've heard that Kararagai is known as the City-States, a country with many cities joined together." Otto, That understanding is correct. The Kuraragai city-states are, roughly speaking, a country composed of 10 large cities. Each city has its own mayor, who is the representative of the city, and there is a council formed by these people, which is the League of Cities, Subaru, ha. It's like the Council of 10 in Pristella. Otto, rather, Pristella's Council of 10 is probably inspired by the League of Cities. As is the case with the Water Plumage Pavilion, there is a large influx of Kuraragai culture in Pristella along the border. Subaru, oh, come to think of it. The Water Plumage Pavilion, where they had stayed at the invitation of Anastasia and her companions, was said to have Wafu style both inside and out, which had been introduced from Kuraragai. Going further back, Subaru believed that Kuraragai's Japanese style itself might be knowledge that was brought from his world, but he put that aside for the time being. In any case, Subaru, it's not a peaceful situation when you're not only a candidate for the kingdom's royal selection, but you've also entered the empire at the behest of the League of Cities as an emissary. Anastasia, you're right. Though not as bad as with Lagunica, Wallachia ain't on the best of terms with Kuraragai. I mean, the empire is basically hostile to everyone. Subaru, it's probably because the emperor is so sharp. It's possible his corners will be a little rounder from now on. Vincent, silence. When Subaru joined Anastasia's brazen and blunt comments, Abel, without changing his expression, hurled an admonishment at Subaru. Subaru stuck his tongue out at that, and Julius was taken aback by this exchange with Abel. Right after, he looked at Subaru in surprise, but since it would have been a long story if he were to explain, Subaru covered it up by simply sticking his tongue out at Julius as well. Anastasia, we heard about the mess in Wallachia while we were in Kuraragai, but we didn't come here to take advantage of it. Vincent, that is very auspicious. However, it is not as if you have no intention of doing so. Anastasia, well, you've got to be tough to get by. Wouldn't it be more uncomfortable for you to be helped for free? Vincent, dash. But of course. At that mischievous look in Anastasia's eyes, Abel's gaze briefly turned toward Emilia. As for Emilia, she looked at them curiously, but from Abel and Anastasia's points of view, Emilia's good intentions were probably way more unexpected. Even Subaru would not go so far as to say that they should help Abel and the others without compensation, and if he did, Otto would give him 1,000 hellish sermons. Then, a hoarse voice asked for a chance to speak. When Bastetz received Abel's silent affirmation, he turned his narrow, nearly thread-like eyes toward Anastasia and Julius, while saying, Bastetz, I am wondering, may I ask why the city-states have sent an emissary to the empire in its current state? Perhaps, you suspect that the problems of the empire have come to your country, and you are pursuing them? Anastasia, even Kuraragai, which believes that time and money are of equal value, certainly wouldn't come to talk about money in the middle of such a busy day. Besides, interference in internal affairs will only cause loss if you're not prepared for it. Vincent, you are being evasive. Did I not say that time is limited? Anastasia, you're impatient, aren't you? All right, all right, all right. Halibel. Halibel, You're fine with me talkin'? Anastasia called Halibel to her side as the imperial leaders were eager to proceed. Leaning against the wall of the dragon carriage, Halibel, who was making a ring with the smoke from his kiseru, stroked the fur on his chin as the gazes gathered from around him. In Subaru's eyes, his fur was really nice, lush, and a full coat. Halibel, then I'll go for it. Actually, something strange has been goin' on in Kuraragai for a while now. Well, the League of Cities have been urgin' me to figure it out. Subaru, something strange? Halibel, y'all can imagine what I'm talkin' about, right? The Hotoke-san have been movin', one. Emilia, Hotoke. Subaru gasped at Halibel's easygoing, slightly pretentious words. But, Emilia, goes and others tilted their heads at the unfamiliar word. Seeing that reaction, Halibel gave a wry smile as he said sorry, and Halibel, righty right, that phrase is Kuraragai dialect so none of y'all woulda understood. In Kuraragai, when you say Hotoke-san, it's got the meaning of a corpse. I'm tryna say. Subaru, are you saying that the city-states also suffered harm from the undead? Halibel, something like that. Halibel calmly nodded, and the same shock that Subaru had just received spread to Emilia and the others anew. Given the undead forces that had come out of left field to interfere with the battle for the imperial capital, if the same thing had happened in Kuraragai, it would mean that the large incident was not a matter confined only to the Empire. Subaru, then, this could be happening on a global scale if we're unlucky, right? What happened to that zombie disturbance in Kuraragai? Halibel, zombie? Subaru, the moving dead people. It'll be easier to understand if we have a name for them. Halibel, haha, I see. For some reason, even though I don't know the word, it sure rolls off the tongue. Gathering Subaru's response, Halibel gnawed on his kiseru and replied in somewhat of a good mood. But, frustrated by Halibel's reply, Subaru hastily shouted out, Halibel-san. With every passing moment, if the undead cataclysm was continuously expanding. Subaru, that would mean we don't have a moment to waste. For you to have come to the Empire is. Halibel, don't you worry, I done tidied up the zombie disturbance that happened back in Kuraragai. So you don't need to get all worked up about Kuraragai. Subaru, Halibel, you're such a sweet kid, how about some candy? I ain't got no candy on me. Without doing anything like feeling around in his sleeves, Halibel soothed Subaru with a light-hearted tone. Involuntarily, Subaru pouted his lips, feeling rebuked for his hasty attitude. Julius, according to Mr. Halibel's investigation, the undead in question. No, the zombies, following the flow of where their damages have been incurred, it seems that they have gradually been proceeding towards the Empire. Therefore, in order to investigate the emergency that occurred within their country, and to issue an alert for caution to your country, the League of Cities has. Anastasia, we done employed Halibel since he was fully informed on the situation, and I've taken on the role as an emissary for the League of Cities. It was also quite the help for crossing the border. That was how Anastasia promptly summed up the details of how she took on the role of emissary for the League of Cities. She may have taken care as to not sound too serious, but unfortunately, no matter how much care she took, the contents of this matter were such that there was no way it would not become heavy. In particular, the fact that the undead cataclysm had occurred earlier in Kuraragai was. Vincent, the incident that occurred in the city-states preceded the Empire. If that is the case, it could be said that the current undead catastrophe was brought to the Empire from your country, is that not so? Anastasia, I guess that's possible, but we got a different view. Vincent, if this is not an attempt to avoid responsibility, let me hear it. Anastasia, it seems like Kuraragai was the first place where the Hotoke-san, where the zombies, caused damage. But, I think the main target was Wallachia, and Kuraragai was used as a practice ground before that. Anastasia replied to Abel's snide remarks with an unchanged attitude. Contrary to her elegant demeanor, the hypothesis she posited was a rather extreme one. The view that Kuraragai was the practice ground, and Wallachia was the main event, was far too harsh. Emilia, why does Anastasia-san think so? That the thing with Kuraragai was not serious, and that Wallachia is the real objective. Anastasia, well, the scale of damage. When the question Subaru had in mind was spoken by Emilia, such was Anastasia's response. While the gaze of her pale turquoise eyes clashed against Emilia's amethyst eyes. Anastasia, the account was convoluted, but Gartler received the first reports of damage to the imperial capital. Even if it ain't fully accurate, it's true that zombies done captured the imperial capital, ain't that right? Julius, it is unusual for the imperial capital at the center of the Wallachian Empire to be captured, and for its citizens all to be evacuated en masse. Henceforth, I have no doubt that the intentions of the enemy who brought about this situation lie in the Empire. Vincent, your reasoning is sound. Hearing the deductions posed by Anastasia and Julius, Abel gave a brief response. However, deep in thought behind his tranquil sable eyes, the emperor, prefacing his speech with incidentally, turned his gaze toward Hannibal. Vincent, the damages you said you suppressed in the city-states, what truly happened there? Despite the state of the empire, I have not heard anything of the city-states being destroyed by undead. Hannibal, righty. I done stopped it before that happened. Though even if I'm saying that, seems like their goal wasn't tar make a mess of Kararagai, but just tar warm up like what Lil Anna said. Vincent, what does that mean? Hannibal, put in it simply, the zombies I happened across had entirely replaced all the people in the city, and were living the same lifestyle as if they were still alive. Seemed like they didn't want us tar know that they had swapped places. Subaru, wah. As Hannibal revealed the truth, Subaru became lost for words. And it was not only Subaru who was surprised. This group of wise people all had thoughtful expressions on their faces, and everyone who was surprised like Subaru was speechless. That was probably to be expected. Just now, Hannibal's story was far too different from what had been assumed. Goes, you are saying that those undead are going as far as to disguise themselves as the living? It is true that Her Excellency Lamia spoke in the same manner as she did then when she was alive. But even so, Serena, if you see them as the living, then that destroys the perception of them being an opponent who attacks indiscriminately. It's already troublesome that some of them are intelligent, but if that happens, the way we deal with them as enemies will need to change quite a lot. This has become excessively amusing. Goes, just what is so amusing, High Countess Dracroy? Even your impudence ought to have its limits. Goes and Serena's views were pitted against each other as a shocking embodiment of that misconception. However, that reaction from the two was natural. In fact, Subaru had the same opinion. These were not opponents which could just be fought, it had become a matter of exploiting their weakness. Even still. Emilia, hey, Hannibal-san, you said that everyone in the town was turned into zombies, but in that town, how many people were living there? It was a question that someone needed to ask. Subaru regretted that instead of himself, he had let Emilia do it. That regret grew deeper and larger after hearing Hannibal's answer. That was because Hannibal, roughly, somewhere round 2,000 people, Emilia, that many. Hannibal's answer clearly quantified the scale of the damage. One could only imagine that drastic scale of damage that made Emilia's expression severely darken, and drove a cold, sharp thorn into Subaru's chest. However, there were not just people who were hurt by Hannibal's answer, there were also those who looked ahead. Vincent, if that many disguised themselves to be the living, I have no choice but to say that it is troublesome. What caused them to be exposed? Anastasia, the reason they were discovered was the amount of supplies that were going in and out of the city. They disguised themselves to some extent, but the numbers between the living and dead people didn't match up. The Hotoke-san don't need food or drinking water, so that's where the discrepancy came from. Vincent, the boundary between the living and the dead. It appears it cannot be crossed. Unlike Subaru, whose emotions halted him, Abel and Anastasia did not stop. While he felt frustrated by that difference, he also did not want to forget what he had told Abel, that it was necessary to not throw away this frustration. Vincent, Bastetts, you had an army stationed in the western part of the empire, correct? Indifferent to Subaru gritting his teeth, Abel posed a question to Bastetts. Bastetts nodded briefly with a yes to the emperor's question, and Bastetts, we have received reports of unrest along the national border with Kararagai in the west. It was before the signs of civil war had expanded, but we feared counter-moves and polarization of the rebel army, so we kept it maintained to keep them in check. You do not mean Vincent, the one entrusted with that army? It ought to have been Groovy Gumlet, was it not? His narrow thread-like eyes opening slightly, Bastetts laid bare his astonishment. As if agreeing with the Prime Minister's realization, Abel let out a small sigh. That which the sigh spoke of was certainly one of the 9 divine generals, He was supposed to be the first-class general whom Subaru had never had a chance to meet face to face, the reason why Abel narrowed his eyes languidly when he said that person's name was. Goes, Your Excellency. Surely not. Surely not. General First Class Groovy is. Vincent, keeping the unrest on the national border with the city-states in check. If that is why they did not participate in the great battle of the imperial capital, and if it has reached a state that we are not even able to meet with them, then there is no other recourse but to assume the worst. Serena, assume the worst? Even I would have a hard time calling that amusing. Goze's face flushed red, and Serena erased the thin smile on her lips. Giving a nod at these leading figures' reactions, Abel spoke. Vincent, Groovy Gumlet and his army have already fallen into the hands of the undead. If they fail to unite with us in the future, we ought to operate under that assumption. Goze, HK. In response to Abel's words, Goze's entire body trembled and he gnashed his molars. It was not a metaphor, he really ground his molars, as an immense amount of indignation ran through the body of the warrior named Goze Ralphon. The possibility of having lost his comrade was hitting him hard. Even for Subaru and the others, who did not know him personally, it was a silent blow. Bastetts, Your Excellency, as per your speculation, if an undead can pretend to be alive, then. Vincent, indeed, the reports from various regions, on their own, have lost credibility. Without increasing the accuracy of the information, to engage in the battle for the recapture of the imperial capital will be next to impossible. Which of the delivered reports were from their living allies, and which ones were from the undead enemy, was not known. Presented with such a frightening possibility, Subaru gasped. Subaru, in other words, that's the reason why the League of Cities entrusted Anastasia-san with being their emissary. Anastasia, the sense of crisis, you'll feel it too, don't ya? It absolutely mustn't be allowed to spread, therefore, we were allowed to go as a small group of reliable people. Anastasia spoke while nodding, to which both Julius and Halibel also expressed agreement. Due to the commencement of the opposition against the undead, they were two trusted people chosen for their individual war potential. Subaru, what about Ricardo, Mimi, and the others? Anastasia, they're building a united front with the League of Cities at the border. Basically, they won't be entering the Empire. If it doesn't stop with the Empire, Kuraragai will have to be prepared. Halibel, that ain't a good omen, but gimme a break. Well, at this point it's too late to do anything bout Lil Anna's sharp tongue. Anastasia, Halibel. Anastasia, who had answered the whereabouts of the absent Iron Fang, looked at Halibel with a smile. She put her hand on her cheek in a soft gesture, and kept her gaze fixed on Halibel. Anastasia, I overlooked it the first time, but can you stop calling me Lil Anna? I ain't a kid anymore, and I'm also a representative of Kuraragai. Halibel, though you say you're not a child, you don't look any different from when you were a wee lassie. Your character hasn't changed from the old days when you were such a rascal together with Ricardo. Anastasia, Halibel. Halibel, alrighty, my bad. Waving his hand, Halibel raised the white flag to Anastasia. The seemingly familiar relationship between the two was intriguing, but compared to the pressing issue at hand, it could only be considered a trivial matter. Indeed, from the point of view of having to defend against the unprecedented undead cataclysm. Julius, once again, I would like to convey the intentions of Kuraragai's League of Cities. In order to contain the damage caused by the undead, the damage caused by the zombies, the city-states will extend as much support as possible to the Empire. Vincent, regarding the support, we can work out the details later. Do you people have any ideas of means to stop this situation? Halibel, about that, it ain't a natural phenomenon that the Hotoke-san wake up, right? No doubt, it's the result of some fella's gaudy intentions. In other words, Anastasia, the mastermind, the caster, the ringleader, or whatever you wanna call it, they gotta be subdued. A huge problem that could plunge the entire world into crisis, and the plan to overcome it. Stopping the entity responsible for this problem, the unseen enemy, was the highest priority of the Kingdom of Lagunica, the Wallachian Empire, and Kuraragai's League of Cities. Subaru, the unidentified enemy. Thinking of the enemy whose true nature was unknown, Subaru murmured softly. What did this enemy look like, and just what were they thinking when they made preparations to commit such terrible barbaric acts? The mere thought of the hardships and obstacles that awaited them in their quest to defeat this yet-to-be-seen enemy sent cold sweat down his spine. However, Subaru, with this many members gathered here. Subaru's heart, seized by fear as it was nevertheless encouraged by the presence of those around him, the Emilia camp, who had even come to the Empire in search of Subaru, and the others, the leaders of the Empire, who hardened their resolve to unite for the sake of protecting it, and the reliable reinforcements from Kuraragai. Subaru, no matter what the enemy is planning, there's absolutely no way that we're gonna lose. That was Natsuki Subaru's sincere declaration of war against the enemy. Indeed, it was around the same time as Subaru's surge of enthusiasm from within the coupled dragon carriages. Ferociously, the reservoir's water gushed forth from the destroyed bulwark, engulfing the imperial capital. As the muddy torrent swept away buildings and tore people and trees asunder indiscriminately, the blue-haired boy, having escaped to a high vantage point, used his hand as a visor as he gazed over the view. Boy, oh dear, I tried to buy as much time as I could, but I wonder if everyone was able to successfully escape. Hopefully Boss and the others didn't let the blood rush to their heads and mess up the decision to retreat. Light-heartedly muttering so, clad in a kimono and wearing zori, was Cecilus. In this grand battle for the imperial capital, as the most difficult problem in all aspects concerning the complete change in the situation was identified by his natural intuition and drama geek mindset, the leading actor of the world rushed to the scene. In fact, if Cecilus had not taken such a selfish and arbitrary action, the imperial capital would have been engulfed by water much sooner, and many more people would have failed to escape, resulting in an enormous amount of casualties. In that sense, Cecilus's actions, beyond anyone's expectations, coincidentally brought about a fortunate outcome for many. However, that was not the case for Cecilus, as the person concerned. With the sudden appearance of the undead forces, the state of the battle for the imperial capital had changed, and trying to surprise the third enemy who was attempting to snatch victory through a boorish intervention, Cecilus had leapt forth. Undoubtedly, he was in a state where he could sing his own praises of it having been a performance meant to enchant the world. And yet, Cecilus, even so, this was completely unexpected. Within the imperial capital engulfed by the muddy torrent, Cecilus murmured so, scratching his cheeks at the sight of undead who had all fled to higher ground like he had, still maintaining their fixation over those who yet lived. There was no doubt that they existed outside the natural order, resurrected by a technique unknown even to Cecilus. In fact, he had also encountered the being that had made them into such things. Even though everything up to that point had proceeded in accordance with Cecilus's intuition. Cecilus, unbelievable, who could have imagined that the situation wouldn't be settled even when the caster is defeated. Collapsed at the feet of Cecilus as he raised his voice, was the caster who had resurrected and commanded the undead. With beautiful pink hair and long ears, the young girl appeared to be around the same age as Cecilus, having confronted the blue lightning, Cecilus. She was a witch whose life had already met its end.